People admit their biggest intimate regrets. The worst bedroom disasters ever told. Mine happened about 5 years ago. My now ex-girlfriend had just left me for a girl, and I was feeling pretty down and lonely. I didn't think I was good enough to meet a girl in real life, so I ended up meeting this woman on an internet dating site. She looked a little large in her pics. All of them were from the chest up, but I kind of like women with a little bit of meat on their bones, and I'd just been broken up with in a crappy manner, so I thought, what the heck? Well, I showed up at her house, and she is way, way bigger than her pics led her on to be. Like, she was at least 350 pounds, if not closer to 500. And, well, you guessed it, I went through with it anyway. In the middle of us doing it, she started wheezing, like seriously wheezing. Naturally, I finished real quick, oh my god, and spilled all over her gigantic rear. Which smelled awful, by the way. Again, I have nothing against plus-size people, but this lady was big enough to where I'm guessing she couldn't wash herself properly. So yeah, we'd been doing canine style as that was the only way that it was possible, and since I was done, I stood up and walked around to see if she was alright. At this point, I'm a bit worried that she's going to die, and that I'd actually finally fulfilled that life goal of effing someone to death. Slightly tempered by the fact that her kids were also sleeping in their rooms. Again, this wasn't my finest hour, folks. Still wheezing and breathing even more heavily, she points me to her bathroom, which looked like it hadn't been cleaned in a year and literally had cat turds laying around the floors. I get her inhaler. This woke up her oldest kid, who walked into her bathroom, to see me in my boxers and her still completely undressed, under a sheet luckily. I had to introduce myself to him, but fortunately his mum had gained enough of her breath back to yell at him to go back to bed. I ended up staying there for about 30 to 45 more minutes just to make sure I wasn't going to make an orphan out of this kid I'd just awkwardly met. Wow. Writing all of this down, I think I'm going to go take a shower now. In short, I did the deed with a 400-pound woman, almost killed her, and her kid walked in on us. I did the deed with my ex-girlfriend while we were in the same bed as her brother. Looking back, what the frick was I thinking? So, to explain, my ex, who we'll call Stacy, and her brother, Angelo, were going to a friend's house to keep her company because she was house-sitting. So I go alone. It's all pretty boring, just drinking and chatting and watching Charmed. So it gets late and we're ready for bed. That friend only had one spare double bed, so we all crashed in that. Thanks to the booze, I was feeling quite ready for things, so while I was spooning her, I just slipped it in. It wasn't your usual bedroom fun times, it was very slow and tame, so that we wouldn't wake her brother. As far as I know, he knows nothing about it. Oh wait, I just remembered that her brother also walked in on me splooting on her face one time. That poor guy. Well, this was more traumatizing than anything, but hey, being given a down-under kiss in the back room of a club, pretty out of character for me. This girl had wanted to have fun, and I hadn't lost my V-plates at that point, so who was I to disagree? She gets up, goes to get a Johnny, and is skipping merrily back to my half-undressed body when she trips, hits her head on the table, and passes out. I kinda didn't know what to do. I was underage in a club and had an unconscious girl and a rapidly growing pool of blood next to me. Turns out blood flow to the scalp is pretty ferocious. To top things off, I'm excited and rigid. 3 hours and an ambulance later, she's getting the last of 12 stitches in her head and kissing me on the cheek as thanks for getting her to a hospital. And that's how I almost lost my virginity. Honestly, congratulations on doing the least shameful thing in these stories so far. And actually, good person points for getting her help. You'd think that would be a basic qualifier of humanity, but I'm not sure that every guy I've met would have done that. Now, I've done a quick read ahead, and I'm not sure, honestly, how I'll read some of these without gagging. So here goes. This wasn't so much gross, but regrettable. Allow me to set the scene. There's a pool in my backyard, driveway separated by gate about 15 feet away. So my then-girlfriend and I decided to fool around in my pool. Parents weren't at home, you see. Things keep going, and eventually we just start doing it. I'd just lowered my trunks and moved her bottom piece to the side. Boom. Mum sneak attacks. Coming through the driveway gate to say hello. Noticing we're both in the pool, don't you see? She was vaguely aware that we were dating, so she didn't pay any care to the fact that my girlfriend was sitting on me. I didn't have time to pull out or maneuver my nether regions away, so I just pulled my girlfriend closer and made it look like she was floating on my lap. Forced to carry a conversation about the day's otherwise mundane events with my mother while still coupled to my girlfriend. didn't finish and didn't want to talk to either of them for the rest of the day. In short, looked my mother in the eye and had a conversation with her while joined at the crotch to my then-girlfriend in a swimming pool. Buddy, I've got news for you. She knew. Oh, that's the best part. She knew and stayed anyways, enduring the horrible awkwardness of it to completely screw up that encounter for that guy. I dated a girl who we'll just say was less vanilla than anyone I'd been with at that time. I was pretty new to anything beyond the most basic sort of relations, so I kind of figured, whatever she's into, I'll give it a try and see how it goes. We started out pretty basic. In the butt, dominating or submissive play, some light throttling, and then she tells me she wants me to F her face. I'm thinking she kind of just means a rough down-under kiss, but no, she's talking about full-on throat pounding. Okay. We get started at it, and I'm kind of digging it, trying hard to take it slow so that I don't hurt her, but getting down in there. She pulls away for a second and says, harder. So I oblige. She keeps signaling to go harder and deeper, which I do until I'm thrusting right down into her throat, which I can see as she's laying on her back with her head hanging off the edge of the bed. Really impressive suppression of the gag reflex, to be honest. She's got tears in her eyes and makeup running. It's getting pretty hot, and to my surprise, I find out that I'm really into this. I'm just about to get there, and then all of a sudden her eyes go wide and throw up explodes out of her face. And I mean from every possible exit. It's on my nethers, my legs, all over her face and chest, the bed and the floor, and she's still coughing it up. And in the middle of all of this, I reach the moment and start concluding on her face. She's laying there, crying. I run to the bathroom, jump in the shower, and promptly throw up as well as I'm trying to wash myself off. The both of us spent about 10 minutes recovering, and then about the next 40 minutes cleaning up. I was gagging the whole time. I'm pretty sure that's the last time she ever wanted to do that. In short, throat effed a girl until she blew chunks on me. I went finito on her as she was doing so, and then threw up myself in her shower. I don't regret this so much, but I'll admit it was certainly gross and disgusting. This new girl moved into an apartment right below mine. The landlord gave her my roommate's number so we could work out parking spaces, and she hit us up to see if we wanted to get a drink at the corner bar. She was already pretty drunk when we showed up, as were we, to be honest. We had a few more drinks at the bar and eventually walked back to our building. She took us to her place, and we continued to drink in her kitchen. She then proceeded to start taking off her clothes, apologizing for each item, saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's just too hot to be wearing a shirt." And eventually, she's just standing there undressed, and after a long silence, my roommate, God bless him, says, "So, do you want to do it with the both of us, or—" "Okay," she cuts him off. We look at each other, shrug, and follow her to the bedroom. Now, at one point, I'm doing her from behind, while she's going south of the border on him, and she starts begging me to stick it in her rear. I've never done that, so I enthusiastically want to oblige. I ask if she has any lubricant, and she points down next to the bed. I look all over, but all I can find is an unmarked bottle with a spritzing top. I've never used the proper stuff, but I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be in a bottle like that. Is this it? Mm-hmm. Okay, whatever. I spray some on. Sniff, sniff. Oh, this is perfume. I've just perfumed my downstairs. I tell her it's not. She sighs, opens a cabinet that I hadn't even seen, gives me the real stuff and goes back to work on my roommate. In retrospect, I really should have been worrying about the possible effects of perfume on her rear end or on my downstairs, but it didn't occur to me at the time. Anyway, we get oiled up, I go in, good time had by all. But that wasn't the gross part. My roommate and I switch places. Now, she's on her back while he's got his gear in her rear, and she's going south of the border on me. I decide to finish and go all over her chest. Now that that's taken care of, I'm getting that come down feeling as the reality of the situation washes over me. Here is a girl that I've met 3 hours prior. I've just done the deed with her, with my roommate, and her head is still in my lap, moaning while he continues to pummel her from behind. I've never had tripartite relations before. Before this, I'd actually only ever been intimate with one woman at this point in my life. What the frick is going on? Before I have a chance to really grasp any of these questions, she suddenly bolts out and runs out of the room. I looked at my roommate in confusion and he says, "Oh dude, she just crapped on me." And sure enough, there was duty all over him and a nice brown stain on the bed. Oof. We'd literally effed the S out of this girl. In short, my roommate and I jointly whoopied with our new neighbor and she duked all over him. I have a question for you viewers. Is it possible for me to say that I love this job and yet still regret every decision in my life that led to me reading this particular story? Let me know your perspective in the comments, or don't. I don't know if I ever want to look at this story again. My God, changing the language was an ordeal, let me tell you. Accidental duty finger. What's the protocol on that? Do you just tell her? I mean, I just pulled it out of there. The protocol is Simba. Oh God, well thanks, this comment made me throw up. Not because it was gross, which it is, but because I'm sick and I was laughing so hard that I threw up. 9 out of 10 would laugh barf again. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Did the deed with my girlfriend while she had a yeast infection. And here's the best part, I didn't know she had one. So before I finished the deal, I went down there like nobody had ever been down there before, she loved it, and then we did it properly. 2 days later, I had a bunch of little white lumps on my tongue, my throat was so sore I couldn't talk, and my downstairs was sore and on fire. Turns out I had a male infection in both my mouth and on my Johnson. I got a yeast infection from my female ex because neither of us knew that guys could contract them. It's just really rare, apparently. Best part was my doctor, who was female. It would be an exceptional case for a man to contract a yeast infection from a partner like this. Then she inspects my gentleman's downstairs. Huh, well, I guess you're exceptional. I was sitting in a guy's lap once when he had his hand up me from behind. Jesus. I have this thing where I like to keep a full bladder. It makes things feel better, probably related to the pressure down there. Anyway, I wound up emptying said bladder on him. We broke up that night. He and I were no more than fun buddies for about a week. I don't even remember having feelings for him, and I think he felt the same way. So don't worry everyone, everyone's fine, and I didn't even shed a tear. You know, these stories make me feel better about every decision I've ever made in my life. I used a toy lightsaber as an adult toy on my girlfriend one time. I have no idea why or how it happened, I was just playing with it in her room while she was laying on the bed undressed. Next thing I know, I'm holding a 3-foot-long lightsaber with buzzing sound effects while my girlfriend is moaning away. I felt so Jedi. Girlfriend sucked a kidney stone out of my death stick. Oh my God. Pain level 9,000. End story. Oof. I once serviced a girl with a baguette covered with a prophylactic. We got it about halfway in. I also got it on video. This girl was up for anything, but the file transfer failed and I accidentally overwrote it. I should clarify the baguette was 4 months old, stale and hard as a rock. My friends still refer to her as Baguette Bardot. My girlfriend and I met while we were tree planting, which as you can imagine is a fairly dirty profession. A bunch of people decided to start a no showering contest to see who could go the longest without showering. Now, a tree planting season is typically 2 months, so this contest was pretty real. Anyway, this cute girl decided to do the contest, so I decided to do it too. That girl and I ended up doing the deed every night for 2 months, without ever having showered, even after working 12-hour days in the dirt. You know what? Screw you guys. That was some of the best whoopee I've ever had. We were like filthy love animals, taking joy in each other's natural scents. I bet I tasted awful though. Oh, and I almost frickin' forgot the best part of this story. Before she met me, she'd only been with women. We've been dating for 3 years now. I guess my smelly downstairs won her over. I mean, how dare you bring your bragging into this cesspit of shame and regret? Ooh la la, look at me, I got a long-term partner into me based on nothing more than my overpowering musk. Go frick yourself with a stale baguette. Ugh, I think I need to lie down after this video. It's been a while, so I guess I can share. I was around 18, my first girlfriend, we were experimenting with different things. So we were doing the deed and I had my middle finger in her rear. Yeah, I know. It was all cool and exciting until her little brother ran in screaming, "You're doing it, aren't you?" My girlfriend jumped like a scared cat and broke my finger. In short, broke my middle finger in my girlfriend's butt. Short version, used to have huge curly hair, like Claudio from Coheed or Blake from Workaholics. Went to a party, got frickin' hammered along with everyone else, started hooking up and moved to a bedroom. Thought I'd go south on her to impress, ended up barfing on her downstairs area. She sat up and returned the favor directly into my hair. We were so grossed up that we both kept expelling our stomach contents. I remember blowing chunks into my cupped hands, trying to prevent it from getting everywhere, and trying to throw it out the window, only to realize there was a screen on the window. It was an absolute frickin' disaster. I mean, this is disgusting and hilarious at the same time. It reminds me of that Family Guy episode where they all drink Ipecac. Who wants chowder? Met a really hot girl while out with a few friends. She approached me, and we really hit it off. Went back to her apartment at the end of the night and began to make out. For some background, I'm pretty short, 5'5", and I have a baby face. She went on to say how this is why she was attracted to me, and she thought I was cute. I'm pretty shy around girls, and I don't hook up much. So by this point, I'm smitten and start really getting into it. That's when she suggests taking it up a notch. She pulls out this novelty t-shirt and pants. They're both supposed to look like a rabbit when worn together. It has this cartoonish belly of a rabbit on the front of the t-shirt, and the pattern of a small rabbit's tail on the back of the pants. I sort of shyly go, we could just keep making out if you want. But she talks me into it, and a few minutes later, we're doing a whole heap of completely non-bedroom related stuff that she found stimulating while I'm dressed as a cartoon rabbit, and really just not feeling in the mood the further we go. In short, didn't get to do the deed, dressed up as a rabbit. I guess I still literally got some tail for a while. Hey, have you guys ever tried Dave's Insanity Sauce? Well, it's frickin' hot as hell. Not enjoyable, and it has no flavor, and that's from someone who loves spicy food. So I had a bottle of it when I was in high school. I used to mess with my friends and just put a dab on the rim of their sodas or whatever and watch them freak out. It was always funny. They'd done it to me a couple of times, so it was all in good fun. One day, my girlfriend at the time comes over right after me and the boys got done smoking a doob and messing with each other using the hot sauce. My boys leave, so I put the moves on my lady. After about 30 seconds of petting, she stops kissing me and grabs my wrist to pull out my finger. She said with the most concerned look I've ever seen on anyone's face before, "Were you messing with the hot sauce? Did you wash your—" And she didn't finish the sentence. She screamed and ran into my shower. She must have been spraying herself out for over an hour. My dumb idiot self, after her being in the shower for 10 minutes, goes into the bathroom to apologize and pee. And of course, I didn't wash my hands. Instant karma. I had my junk hanging into the sink basin, splashing it off and apologizing over and over, and she's in the shower cursing at me. I guess it wasn't a game ender. We've been married 4 years and have 3 kids, so, you know. Oh, sweet God. It's like that experience I talked about the other day with putting my contact lenses in with chili-coated fingers. Except somehow worse? I mean, that's a trial by fire for a relationship there. And it sounds like you guys passed. Congratulations! Next up, another story of fire down below, and not the good kind. She was wild and up for anything. She apparently liked it in the rear. Fumbled for lubrication and picked up a tube of icy hot, but I noticed and laughed. Whew, good thing we didn't just use this, right? She gets a crazy look in her eye and says, "Why not?" Well, let me tell you why not. The burning, oh the burning. For me, it was like I'd stuck my member in a nest of fire ants that were still upset about Gore Bush in 2000 and were ready for revenge. But I jumped in the shower and washed that off, and within an hour or so it was just a distant rumor of heat, like a cat napping in a sunbeam. But for her, she was in so much pain, she writhed howling on the bathroom floor for a solid hour, and then just became catatonic for the rest of the night. It was probably hotter than the first bite of microwave chicken pot pie. Butt in her butt. Bad idea, do not do. I was seeing a guy, and one day I went on my computer to find myself signed out of everything. So I checked my history just to see if he'd covered his tracks. Oh boy, he had not. What I found wasn't that disturbing, just like PVC and very mild alternate bedroom interest stuff. I thought, oh, I'm cool with that, and kept my mouth shut. So I ordered some pretty out-there shoes normally worn by exotic dancers, a PVC catsuit, soft whips, handcuffs, ropes, and a big old toy, which I was fully intending on using on myself. I set up the living room while he was working, got into my filthiest mood, and waited. He came home around 6 p.m. and his jaw drops and we get down to things. He starts asking me to hurt him little by little, whipping his butt and legs and stuff, Then he wanted me to sit astride him and punch him in the face and throttle him. So I'm sort of thinking, this is a little weird, but in for a penny, in for a pound. And I accidentally bust his nose, so there's now blood going everywhere. And he's like, just keep going. I give him a tissue and he sat up and was saying how into it he was and we should carry on. So I think I'll give him a little show myself with the toy. He's suffered enough, right? Apparently not. He wants that toy in his butt. I'm not comfortable with this, but what the hell. So I grease her up and give it to him, noting to myself that his butthole wasn't that tight. It's at this point I hear a key in the front door, and who the frick has that key? In walk his mother and 3 older sisters. While I try to jump up and find something to cover my PVC-covered self, he's tied up, bent over the couch, blood everywhere. His mum's face is unbelievable, and as she looks around, the toy slowly slides out of his rear and flops onto the ground. In short, punched and stuck a toy into my boyfriend upon request, and his whole frickin' family walks in. What has been the best corporate Darwin Award? As in, how did they kill their own business? I own a vineyard and was looking for numbered tags to attach to the post at the end of each row. One website that sold such items said, "Don't use cheap cattle ear tags to mark your rows," and proceeded to describe how much better their tags were. I thought, cheap cattle ear tags? Of course! And promptly found and purchased them at a fraction of the cost. I would never have thought of it if not for this great marketing. I officially nominate Schlitz Beer for the Corporate Darwin Hall of Fame. #1 beer in America by far in the late 60s and early 70s, when some genius at the head office decided to change the recipe to save money on ingredients. Sales fell off a cliff. Almost immediately they changed back to the old recipe, but it was already too late. The old Schlitz drinkers stayed away in droves. The company remains up Schlitz Creek without a paddle. We actually had Schlitz as a case study in business school. Management went through no less than 10 successive rounds of cost-cutting, incrementally decreasing product quality with each round. The last cost-cutting was the death knell. They stopped filtering out the last little yeast flakes from the final product, figuring that consumers wouldn't mind little flecks of yeast in the head of their beer. Lesson learned. Consumers typically don't notice the drop in quality going from A to B, but definitely notice the drop from A to J. Prodigy Online Service. They had a great message board system which was included in the monthly rate. They got greedy and for no reason other than wanting to make more money, started charging people to use the board per message. It was beyond idiotic, and at the time, so many of us users were like, okay, we're done with Prodigy then. Within 1 year, they lost almost complete market share to CompuServe and AOL, and were all but non-existent shortly after. All because they got extra greedy. The Osborne Effect. The Osborne 1 was the first commercially successful PC. The founder pre-announced the successor to the Osborne 1 way before it was ready to come to the market. His announcement, touting how good the next machine would be, killed demand for the Osborne 1. The company then ran out of money and couldn't bring the successor to market, declared bankruptcy, and died. You know, as much as it makes sense that announcing your product will be obsolete in a few years isn't a great business idea, I do kind of prefer the honesty to the Steve Jobs method of announcing literally every product as the greatest of its kind for all eternity, only to immediately drop the pretense after the new product comes out. Whoever was in charge of getting the yellow pages online. Multi-billion-dollar industry that adopted way too late. Segway. I know this company still technically exists, but bear with me. I remember before the Segway was unveiled, it was billed by its creator, Dean Kamen, as a product that would revolutionize the way cities are being built. This quote still sticks in my head after all these years. It was also quoted as being a big deal, as big as the PC, and possibly more important than the internet. But the product and company would prove to be a major disaster. The Segway debuted in November 2002 on Amazon for $5,000. In June 2003, President Bush made headlines for falling off a Segway during a test drive. This event alone probably killed the future of the company. Then in September 2003, the company recalled all units due to injuries sustained by customers when the battery died. Fast forward to 2009, Segway was acquired by UK businessman James Heselden. In a literal Darwin Award moment, Heselden dies when he rides his Segway over a 30-foot cliff and falls into the river below. Today, as we know, the Segway lives on in a world of underachievement, the fodder of mall cops and tourism packages, not revolutionizing anything. It did, however, appear on an episode of Duck Dynasty. Oldsmobile with the "It's not your father's Oldsmobile" ad slogan. The kids didn't want it, and the old folks thought that it changed. They never recovered from the loss. Hull & Clark. They print Avon catalogs, checks, Scantron forms, stuff like that. Their business was dying because they leveraged everything on check printing. They do something like 98% of checks in the US. If you have a checkbook, I bet $10 it's a Hull & Clark check. So anyway, they spun up a company called Fidipudi, $100 million investment. Super custom stationery printing. They organized call centers, set up 100-line VoIP systems in anticipation of the millions of orders they were going to get, dozens of graphic artists recruited, and nobody bothered to tell them that the advertising platform they'd already blown $40 million on, 1, didn't work, and 2, targeted an audience that had very little interest in old-school stationery or even one-off custom cards. Their advertising platform chosen? Facebook. Total orders taken? 13. Also, that name, Fidipudi. Phidippides was the Athenian herald who ran the 25 miles from the battlefield near Marathon to Athens to announce the Greek victory over Persia in the Battle of Marathon, only for then to immediately collapse and die. It's kind of fitting. This really was one of amazing stupidity. It was the late 1990s, the middle of the tech boom, in San Diego, one of the hearts of said tech boom. A small consulting company had about 100 programmers contracted out to about a dozen companies. The profits were huge. The company charged $200 an hour per person, paid the employee about $70 an hour, and pocketed the rest. The only overhead was a small main office, a recruiter, an HR person, and an accountant to handle all that money and small expenses. Then the company scored big. Microsoft HQ in Seattle wanted some of these people, contracting about a dozen of them to start. The profits were so massive, the programmers were flown back to San Diego each weekend. The deal was still per hour, and Microsoft loved the people and asked them to work through weekends, saving the company the cost of airfare and bringing in a couple of extra million. So, 2 months later, expense reports are getting kicked back. The company was refusing to pay large parking fees for people who worked 7 days a week for 3 to 4 weeks. The company accountant said they should have taken a cab to the airport since they were gone for 3 weeks. After reminding the accountants they hadn't intended to stay that long, that they did so at the company request, they were still refused reimbursement on parking. 5 of these contractors resigned due to the parking payment issue, and others slowly followed. The Microsoft deal collapsed because they kept losing people, and within the year the whole company folded. Yes, this company folded during the tech boom in a boom city. Hundreds of millions of dollars lost because they wanted to screw over their most income-producing employees over maybe $2,000 in parking fees. I'm very much into finance, so I've got an interesting one. In 2008, speculators were driving the price of oil to unsustainable levels. Even back when the economy was healthy, those prices made no economic sense at all. Enter Sem Group, a pipeline company that moved oil and traded energy futures on the side. In 2008, they decided to go short on oil. That's to say, they bet that oil prices would go down. For the month or two that followed, oil kept pushing higher and higher, and they kept averaging up their position. The problem here was, Sem Group's management was so certain that oil prices would fall, they shorted oil on margin, meaning they started borrowing money from their broker to short oil more. Eventually, the clearinghouses of the brokerage with whom Sem Group assumed this large short position decided that this was too much. Sem Group's losing too much money and they might go bankrupt, because Sem Group owed them money on margin, and there's a risk that they'll lose that money. So they, the clearinghouse, forced Sem Group to unwind their entire position to Barclays. Sem Group eventually went bankrupt. Literally 1 week later, oil crashed spectacularly. Over a month or so, it fell nearly 80%. Sem Group missed out on a $5 billion profit. This was written in 2014. Groupon isn't dead yet, but Google offered to buy them, then a 2-year-old local e-commerce startup, for $5.75 billion in the fall of 2010. Groupon didn't accept the offer, and now there are countless Groupon alternatives. When someone offers you $6 billion for something you just made, I say you accept it. Take the money and invent something else. Gerald Ratner called his own product total crap and inadvertently wiped out $500 billion from the company's value. He compounded this by going on to remark that some of the earrings were cheaper than a Marks & Spencer's prawn sandwich, but probably wouldn't last as long. Dumb move, but the guy had a great sense of humor. Even better is the Ratner effect. I love that it has a name. The narrator finds this name even funnier given that Brett Ratner is just kind of a byword for bad filmmaking as well. And, less humorously, several misconduct accusations from many different women. Seems more deserving of the career crash than Gerald Ratner. Netflix came really close before they wised up and shelved Quickster. In the 2010s, they announced they were dividing its services into two different companies. All of the instant streaming would be handled by Netflix, while the physical DVDs would be under a new service called Quickster. It was universally hated by the internet as a whole, because back then about 12 million users had joint streaming and DVD packages. The change basically forced them to reconfigure their Netflix subscription to streaming only, and then sign up for a Quickster account to get the DVDs. It basically required two accounts for users to get what they were previously getting from one account. The Quickster idea was cancelled within a month. Fun fact about that too is that the Quickster handle was already owned by some random high schooler who would exclusively tweet about smoking green herb and doing the deed with his girlfriend, so when people looked up Quickster on Twitter, that was the first thing they'd find. I trot this story out anytime there's a discussion about business stupidity. This wasn't a big corporation, just a small business, but the principle applies. When I was growing up, there was a hardware store in my town owned by a crusty old guy. The aisles were 2 feet wide and the light bulbs were only 40 watts. "It saves electricity," the owner would say if someone complained. The shelves were lined with small, worn cardboard boxes of nails, nuts, screws, bolts, and washers, practically every connector or fastener available. Every size, shape, threading, and composition. Did you need a zinc alloy washer 2 inches in diameter with a 2mm hole? Or a reverse-threaded, hex-headed brass machine bolt? Or a lock nuts for the tailpipe bracket of a 1977 Oldsmobile? This old guy had it. When I was about 20, he passed away and his wife hired a business manager. He installed new lighting, widened the aisles, eliminated the inventory that didn't sell well, which was about 90% of it. The store was stocked with the most popular fasteners and related hardware. It looked nicer, it smelled nicer, it had most of what everyone needed. And it was out of business in less than a year. Most of what the old guy sold sat on shelves for years. I remember one box from the 1940s that was still half full of bolts. 99% of it you'd never need. But if you needed any fastener, you went to his place first because you knew he had it. Once the place was the same as any other hardware store, people quit driving across town to pay slightly more for guaranteed selection. Using Android is like peeing your pants for warmth in winter, said by Nokia September 21, 2010. We love rice here in the Philippines. There's a popular and relatively cheap Japanese restaurant here that served unlimited rice for every meal, and it was very known for it. Some brilliant guy decides to take out the unlimited rice, and word gets around, and people stop going. A few months later, they decided to put the promo back, but the customers had just stopped coming by that point. To all the Filipinos wondering, you're right, it's Tokyo, Tokyo. That would be like Olive Garden deciding that breadsticks are no longer unlimited. I'd never go back. Schwinn ignoring the super small niche market of mountain bikes, leaving it little specialty shops like Trek. Way to blow a 30-year lead, brainiacs. Borders ceasing business operations with Amazon. Buy MySpace for $580 million and then scare away users with ads intended to generate profit. Users leave MySpace and join Facebook. Sell MySpace for $38 million. Ouch. Try Bebo, brought for $850 million and the original owners bought it back for $1 million. Circuit City making the decision to no longer sell appliances. No matter how bad the economy is, people will still buy refrigerators, washers, vacuums and stuff, but they'll wait on TVs and video games. Selling off CarMax was pretty stupid too. And speaking of Circuit City, laying off the higher paid employees and keeping all the lower paid ones, apparently never connecting the dots on a level of product knowledge equaling a level of compensation. I remember going into a Circuit City just as the nosedive began, and a young man telling me outright that all the good people were let go. He wasn't being rude or apathetic, just being honest. I hope he landed on his feet. Good guy. Fred Goodwin of Royal Bank of Scotland, or RBS. Probably has to be up there somewhere, right? Turned RBS into the largest company in the world by buying a lot of other companies. These companies didn't do well, the bank collapsed spectacularly, and the government had to buy 73% of it to stop it from folding completely. Fred the Shred lost his job and his knighthood and was forced into retirement. When he joined the company, shares were 442p, and when he left they were worth 65p. They also posted the biggest loss in UK history, $24 billion. Damn, I didn't realize you could lose a knighthood. That's one hell of a screw-up. Yes. Only 7 people have ever had them taken away, and only one before 1979. And that guy was strung up on a gallows for treason. Only the monarch has the authority to take knighthoods away. The current process has a special committee of parliament that recommends people to the Queen that should have them taken away. You basically have to be convicted of a serious crime or bring the profession you were knighted for into total disrepute, as in Fred's case. Dig, that irreversible system upgrade. It's like a pretty version of Reddit, but without subreddits. Then they changed it so users couldn't really submit content anymore. And the only postings came from the RSS feeds of major news outlets. It's still around in that form, but almost nobody uses it. I hated Reddit at the time, mostly for its aesthetics, but this forced me over and I haven't regretted it. I worked on the TV show Fear Factor. Pretty sure making two hot blonde girls drink donkey splooge killed the show. It was cancelled after the controversy of that episode. Western Union rejected the telephone in 1876. This year, Powder, the group that ran Park City Mountain Resort, the number 3 family ski resort in the country, got absorbed by Vail, its competition, and removed from ownership of its resort. Why? Because after 20 years of having the greatest lease in history, about $150,000 a year for a resort that grosses millions and millions, the end of the lease time rolled around, and they forgot to renew it. Literally, that's it. Someone didn't take down a note, and they turned in their paperwork 3 days late, got sued, and lost everything. Do your paperwork, folks. Radio Shack's decision to move away from hobbyists and general electronics to becoming a cell phone store. Because why be the best dork store when you could be the crappiest Best Buy? Sadly, it might have gone that way anyway, with the slow ongoing death of most brick-and-mortar stores. But even though I'm not sure Radio Shack could have been saved either way, seeing a store overgeneralize and lose all of its character is probably a good sign when you're an employee that the end is nigh. The Peanut Corporation of America. They found salmonella in their products. The owner covered it up and told them to just ship it. Infected and killed scores of people, the company went bankrupt almost immediately after it was traced back to them, and the owners were charged and prosecuted. The Milwaukee Road is one of my favorites. They abandoned half of their main line because they thought it was losing money despite having heavy traffic. Several years after they'd torn up the line, they realized there had been an accounting error, and that was actually the only part of the system that was making money. They sold off some of their rolling stock to generate some short-term cash and then leased it back. When the lease price increased, they couldn't afford to repair their own equipment, so they sold off more to the leasers. Rinse and repeat. Instead of completing their electrification and buying new electric locomotives, which GE was willing to give them a deal on, they decided to remove the electrification and sell it for scrap. When they did this, scrap prices fell and it ended up being more expensive to dieselize than it would have been to finish their electrification. Needless to say, things did not go well for them. Breyer's ice cream was the brand with simple ingredients listed on the back and built a name bragging about how real they were. You might remember the commercials of little kids reading milk, sugar, vanilla back in the 90s. When they got bought out by Unilever, the ingredients now are so artificial they can't legally be known as ice cream anymore and is called frozen dairy dessert. Consumers confused why their favorite flavor doesn't melt and has the consistency of marshmallow have complained on the brand's social media accounts. Here's a sad one. Malden Mills, the original producer of the Polar Fleece material. CEO Aaron Fauerstein decided not to patent it, which made it an open-source textile able to be produced cheaply and widely. This wasn't the decision that killed the business, though. In 1995, Malden Mills burned down. At a time when manufacturers were relocating their operations overseas to cut costs, Fauerstein rebuilt the factory at the same location, and he continued to pay the salaries and benefits of all his employees during the rebuilding. Said Fauerstein, "I have a responsibility to the worker, both blue-collar and white-collar. I have an equal responsibility to the community. It would have been unconscionable to put 3,000 people on the streets and deliver a death blow to the cities of Lawrence and Methuen. Maybe on paper our company is worthless to Wall Street, but I can tell you it's worth far more." Sadly, the company never recovered. Fauerstein was eventually ousted, Malden Mills declared bankruptcy, and its assets were sold off or spun off to new companies. If we're going with recent, Eddie Lampert, the CEO of Sears, is one of the best contenders for the Corporate Darwin Award. He's an Ayn Rand-loving, free-market ideologist who attempted to take his non-reality-based style of life out of the lobbyist and Congress-rigged world of hedge funds and into retail. He laid off, cut and trimmed back everything he could, and forced departments, managers, and employees to fight each other for resources, and pay under the delusion that the company would benefit from a survival of the fittest atmosphere. Since that time, Sears lost half its value in 5 years and closed more than half of its stores, not to mention just about destroyed one of the oldest and most trusted brands in the history of the United States. Kodak telling the creator of digital photography to go F himself. This goes much deeper than anyone knows. My father was on the cutting edge of Kodak, working in research and development. There are literally so many times Kodak sold off patents on products that were ridiculously expensive to produce. My favorite example? Remember when CD players were ridiculously expensive? It was because the lens cost a ton to produce. You remember when the price dropped? Yeah, Kodak sold the patent to Sony for $50,000. There was an employee who worked at Kodak who developed this specialized process. For doing something, I can't remember exactly what. Kodak didn't want it, sold that employee the patent for $10,000. He's a millionaire now. It annoys me because it was basically the nail in the coffin for Rochester, New York, and as a side effect, the whole region. Our biggest employer now? A hospital and a grocery store. Thanks a ton, Kodak, Xerox, and Bausch & Lomb. Blockbuster not buying Netflix for $50 million. Netflix is now worth $406 billion in 2025. Blockbuster has a one-season show on Netflix starring Randall Park? There's a restaurant in Austin that has really great chicken wings. At one point a few years back, the wings were taken off the menu because they were too popular and slowing down the kitchen. That lasted about a month before someone realized it was a better idea to put some time and effort into improving the kitchen rather than kill off their best-selling item. Enron for paying their executives IDEA bonuses before the ideas turned a profit. They paid one guy millions for inventing an online movie downloading service about 10 years before it was feasible. Ironically, the documentary is available on Netflix. It didn't kill the company, but Fox inadvertently handed George Lucas a multi-billion-dollar merchandising empire to save a measly $20,000 on his Star Wars salary. The Sci-Fi Channel changing the spelling of their name to SYFY, removing the word channel and replacing their good shows like Battlestar with crappy reality TV. They're lucky they still exist at all. Motorola thinking smartphones wouldn't catch on. I hope in the future it's Comcast for not investing in decent internet or customer service. I audited an air cargo company and essentially a member of the legal department had shifted the terms and conditions on their lease contracts. Basically, they rearranged the terms and in the process of copy-pasting the information, they unintentionally cut the part out which pushed all of the normal flying expenses back onto the client. Fuel, landing, fees, all of the stuff a normal air cargo contract would come with. The contract was for their biggest client, and for a while the client signed the papers and paid as they normally had until the client got all new management. The new management at the client reviewed all contract terms and found they no longer had to pay these expenses they previously had to. So they didn't, for 2 years. When the company I audited found receivables aged greater than 2 years, they began to flip out and demand payment. The customer basically said, "We have no obligation to pay, so we're not." The company I audited went back to the agreement where they pretty much said, the receivable was not collectible, so they wrote it off, forcing them to take an enormous hit on their income statement, which in turn caused them to break a debt covenant, and all their long-term debt became current. Boom. Dead in the water, all due to a copy and paste error. In short, company went bankrupt because lawyers can't copy-paste. Kmart took out a whole bunch of debt to buy back their shares, looking to raise their share price. When news of this came out, Walmart, which had basically no debt at the time, decided it would be a good time to start a price war. Kmart had to pay off interest, whereas Walmart had little to no interest payments to make. So, by lowering the profit margin to a point where Kmart had to cut back on their internal investment, Walmart surged ahead while Kmart lagged behind. The biggest cut Kmart made, I believe, was CAPEX, or capital expenditures, things like making new stores and upkeeping current ones. And that's a major reason why Walmart is so popular and booming, whereas Kmart has always seemed just a little bit off. General Motors decided to make as many cars as possible using the same model and only changing the brand. Too many models and not enough quality were all being sold to the same tier of consumer. They hoped for regional loyalty at best and killed their own company. It didn't kill the business, but Xerox basically gave away the concepts behind the modern PC to Apple. What war crimes do the good guys in media commit against the so-called bad guys? In Stargate Atlantis, the goodies capture a wraith and perform medical experiments on him. A recent example I can think of is in Without Remorse, where you're supposed to believe that Michael B. Jordan is making a heroic one-man stand during a Black Ops mission in Russia, until you realize the Russian police and soldiers are responding to what appears to be a terror incident rather than the movie's villain blowing himself up, and have no clue who's shooting at them. Is it really Tom Clancy IP without a few war crimes sprinkled in under the guise of heroism? Oddly enough, in Red Storm Rising, he has an American airman get captured and treated well by his Soviet interrogator, and he ends up talking quite a bit. Shows how well that technique works compared to torture. You remember the time the Powerpuff Girls beat up Mojo Jojo while he was in jail doing absolutely nothing wrong? The girls should be tried for what they've done to Mojo, seriously. There's an episode in some of the more recent Powerpuff Girls where Bubbles gets a bad haircut and I think something happens to her face, so she feels ugly and decides she wants to be evil. She goes to Mojo Jojo's lair and asks to team up, and he's like, "No, I'm literally relaxing. I don't want to do evil stuff with you right now, Bubbles." But she keeps insisting, so he's like, "Fine, okay, whatever." And then Blossom and Buttercup come and mess up Mojo Jojo, and Bubbles switches back to their side. Then they blame the situation on Mojo Jojo and call him ugly. It was so screwed. Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Everything. When I remembered that General Grievous staged an attack on a medical facility, I began to wonder if the writers had a checklist of all the Geneva Convention rulings they could fit into the show. The Republic commits war atrocities all the time, and so do the rebels. Star Wars is full of war crimes on all sides. In the Star Trek Discovery pilot, they booby-trap dead bodies, which is a war crime. Yes, maybe in the future the Geneva Convention has been updated, they actually name-check that it still exists in Episode 3 of Season 1, but you'd expect it to change for the better, not give the okay for the same tactics extremists use today. They also try to murderize a whole planet, but compromise to overthrowing the legitimate ruling government. In Star Trek Enterprise, Archer threw a guy into an airlock and decompressed it until the guy talked. James Bond commits multiple acts of torture and frequently threatens unarmed people with assault or even death. This is played almost as satire in the later movies, where he's portrayed unambiguously as a complete sociopath. In a sense, that's getting back to the source material. The original Bond in Ian Fleming's works was portrayed as being cold and ruthless, and quite possibly a sociopath of sorts. Yes, the narrator actually enjoys that the Craig films do portray Bond as someone who should not at all be emulated rather than a cool role model. Too bad that so many people failed to see that. People are dumb. Isn't Ender's Game about tricking a child into committing xenocide? Yeah, but the terrible psychological effect that it has on Ender is the whole point of the book, something the movie sadly neglected. The end of the movie takes place 2/3 of the way into the book. A huge plot arc of that series is Ender trying to figure out how to deal with his own internal grief at what he's done, while simultaneously being praised as a hero. Well, the second book is all about trying to make things right by finding a new planet for the Queen. Star Wars. The Republic is literally creating human beings with short lifespans, puts control chips in their brains, and indoctrinates them to feed them into the meat grinder. That is 40k levels of dark. Also, everyone has way more than necessary sapient droids that get treated like slaves at best. The basic battle droids could probably beat the Turing test, and even the Jedi kill them basically for fun. The droids' right issues are hilariously unexplored. Every droid you see blasted is at least semi-sentient and held in slavery. They're clearly able to feel emotions and pain. Torture is typically a default. The protagonist doesn't have time to play by the rules, so he tortures info out of the person. Hollywood loves to show that torture is the only way to get info out of someone when it's actually not only a war crime, but the least reliable method. Only Captain America used the steak and potatoes method. In the last Hunger Games movie, didn't the good guys drop medical supplies only just for half of them to be bombs to make the bad guys look bad? Yeah, they committed a really nasty false flag attack against children. To be fair, it's a major plot point that turns Katniss against them. She even shoots the head of District 13 afterwards. Also, her sister was not old enough to be a volunteer army medic according to District 13, who was so militant about rules. Coin was a control freak, so she would have had to specifically made the decision to send Prim, and also been aware of the tactics they were going to use. Inglorious bastards. I'm pretty sure you're not allowed to scalp people. This is a good answer because they actually are in a war, and a lot of answers here are just regular crimes. The protagonists in that film scalp dead and dying soldiers, they execute prisoners of war and disfigure survivors. Even Landa has a line near the end, during the make a deal scene, something like, "As of right now, your plan, which some would call a terror plot, is still a go." I mean, he's got a point. The plan is to essentially assassinate the German high command by bombing a theater full of citizens. Fake surrendering and harming someone after they've surrendered. Every other damn action movie. I remember when I first played Skyrim, this guy said, I yield, and stopped attacking. I held back, thinking this was some sort of nifty game mechanic, and then he went right back to trying to kill me. I was annoyed. A lot of good guys flirt with or outright commit torture in interrogation sessions. Remember, it's considered bad to physically attack someone when they can't fight back, no matter what the circumstances, and in the real world it usually doesn't work. Torture makes people say whatever the torturer wants them to say, not what they actually need to hear. People who don't know anything will come up with the most elaborate stories to make it stop. Not to mention guerrilla forces are quite selective with information to prevent spies and defectors from gleaning anything useful. Heck, I wonder if a guerrilla commander ever deliberately gave a fighter false info to let him be captured and have the false information tortured out of him so the opposing forces would walk right into an ambush. In Community, Pierce Hawthorne fakes a heart attack to shoot one of City College's stormtroopers, then disguises himself in the guy's armor and shoots the remaining stormtroopers to win a paintball tournament for Greendale. Whenever somebody fakes a surrender, it's disturbing how many people writing back to me don't know that you can't fake a surrender. Obi-Wan Kenobi is a master of the fake surrender. I just got past Kong Prell in the Clone Wars and Obi-Wan did the fake surrender at least 3 times by then. That's Season 4. There are so many war crimes in the Clone Wars, and those are just the ones shown. That scene in Saving Private Ryan where they shoot the unarmed Czech conscripts. That was literally against the rules of engagement, and a damn tragedy. Could have happened in real life too. Imagine being forced to fight for Germany and just when you think it's over, you get killed by your perceived saviors. Perfidy, which is a fancy word for surrendering only to whip around and start killing your captor. It's seen a lot in Star Wars: The Clone Wars. Inglorious bastards. Beating surrendered combatants with a baseball bat is not great, to be honest. I love the scene in which the Germans watch a propaganda film in Shoshana's theater, and they're all cheering and clapping like idiots at the obviously romanticized Third Reich hero mowing down ally soldier after ally soldier when you realize you, as a viewer, have been doing essentially the same thing. Anakin Skywalker in the Clone Wars is notorious for falsely surrendering to the Separatists. He did this in Season 7, Episode 9 to lure the tactical droid out of hiding on a battlefront before the Siege of Mandalore. Given a lot of his conduct, we can grant Anakin the right of master when it comes to war crimes. False surrender, ridiculously common in Star Wars, World War II films, and middle schools. This regards cop movies more, but I've recently been rewatching some absolute bangers from the 80s, including Lethal Weapon, Tango and Cash Action, Jackson, and it's hilarious how insane and borderline sadistic the cops are. Have you ever considered what a psycho John McClane is to kill some guy, put a Christmas elf hat on him and write, "Now I have weapon we can't say on YouTube, ho ho ho," on his shirt in Die Hard? It's such a funny 80s trope that cops were supposed to be these rule-breaking fanatics. Don't forget Die Hard 5 when he causes an accident, sucker punches a guy and steals a car. I am dying over here at the fact that half this group is just Star Wars-based stuff. Yeah, honestly, the narrator hasn't even seen most of the Clone Wars, but even from the original films, he can remember a few moments where the goodies go from being surrendered to pulling a bunch of weapons and killing the enemy while they're surprised. Every scene with a flamethrower. Even the 2017 My Little Pony film is guilty of this. I was actually going to blame you for false information, but I just did a quick search that it was in fact banned in 1919, but I thought it was 1978 because that was when the US stopped using them. The very existence of flamethrowers proves that sometime, somewhere, someone said to themselves, "You know, I want to set those people over there on fire, but I'm just not close enough to get the job done," said by George Carlin in 1984. Where they dress up as soldiers of the evil empire and proceed to kill enemy soldiers who think that they're on their side. Looking at you, Star Wars. Although, to be fair, if the enemy I was facing had a planet-destroying laser, that would be a crime I'd happily commit. Every time they kill a minion. Nobody cares about the ninja army getting slaughtered, but the moment the big bad steps in the room, suddenly everyone has a conscience. Or they're storming the evil fortress or business or mansion and some former veteran is just working security there to try and feed his family. He has no clue the boss is some supervillain bent on world domination or has kidnapped the protagonist's kid. Crap, the authorities don't even know. So from his perspective, there's just some armed psycho taking out his co-workers and friends, so he's doing his job, and now he's dead or permanently disabled because the hero has to be a hero and not say anything about his family or the evil plot and not make any attempts to spare lives. Superheroes who destroy half the town before the villain even does anything. There was actually a Superman comic where he heard the news about a hurricane that destroyed houses because they weren't built to the standard, and that the government was going to build new houses for the displaced residents and ensure the new ones were up to code. So he flies off to a nearby poor district in town, told the residents to get out, and proceeded to destroy the entire district to ensure the government would build them new, better houses. Yes, that was an actual comic. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I don't care if they've got magical superpowers, a lot of the good guys are using child soldiers. Spider-Man's 15 in Homecoming. Attack on Titan has them all training at the same age, and they're fighting monsters well before they're 18. I think in Spider-Man's case, Tony realized, and that's why he sent Peter home. In Attack on Titan, it's literally life or death. In XCOM and XCOM 2, you commit some serious atrocities. Collateral damage in spades inside of cities, grenades and rockets going astray and killing civilians, acid, poison, and incendiaries are all utilized because screw the aliens pain, and the Reaper faction literally eats aliens. Plus you can go some dark directions in the lore if you want. This is all excused as, aliens never signed the Geneva Convention, so it's fine. Then you learn most of the aliens are basically either part human or forced into doing what they did. Yeah, that felt really blatant. Especially with the, we'd never modify our soldiers like those insurgent people do, that's grotesque. You then go on to upgrade your soldiers with 6 times more upgrades than the enemy have, and basically take a soldier's head and put them onto a robot body. They kill all the bad guys, as in the soldiers and mercenaries and other goons working for the bad guy, but they can't kill the bad guy because he needs to be brought to justice. Oh, that's not a war crime, it's just kind of stupid, and it's a dumb trope of storytelling. Mostly anything the bad faction does that makes our blood boil. It's somehow okay for the heroes to torture them, kidnap their relatives and stuff, it's only wrong when the bad guys do it. The human brain is funny. There's an individual, let's call him A. Skywalker. No, that's too obvious. Let's call him Anakin S. His list is a little intense. Let's see if I can get everything. There's false surrendering, executing a surrendering foe, acting outside the rules of engagement, massacring an entire village including women and children, killing fleeing foes, fighting as a child soldier, using child soldiers, treason, and torture. Oh, don't forget he killed child soldiers too. They were just on his side. The guy from Taken does torture. Impersonating an enemy soldier. It's only a breach when you do it for the espionage or an offensive mission. It's not a war crime to impersonate an enemy or non-combatant, like Red Cross, UN, or Chaplain, to evade capture or escape as a prisoner of war. Frank Castle, aka the Punisher. Due process of law, civil right violations, kidnapping, torture, and murder. But they deserve every bit of it, and we've loved Frank while he was committing these obvious crimes. He's more of an anti-hero though. Even he himself doesn't say what he's doing is right, only necessary. There's an issue where he sees some cops putting Punisher stickers on their cars, and he tells them to knock it off because he's not the good guy. He tells them to emulate Captain America instead. I hate it when the main character hates killing, but then kills swaths of cronies working for the big bad, gets to said big bad, and refuses to kill them. I just killed 50 people, mostly security, but some were scientists, some could have been secretaries, IT people, whatever. But I can't kill you, because then I'll be just as bad as you. Generally in the film followed by, hey, he shot me, bang. Now I'm justified in killing him. There's a great post somewhere pointing out all the times Avatar Aang kills someone, only for him to have a crisis of conscience before fighting the planet-wide dictator who burned off his son's face for not wanting to sacrifice troops. The rebels killed a crap ton of people when they blew up the Death Stars. So many independent contractors who just took a guaranteed government gig. Well, the first one was complete, the second took an active role in an ongoing battle. There's no crimes here, they were active and hostile. If anything, the Empire committed a crime by getting into the battle with those contractors on board. Obviously not a movie, but I'd like to bring up Halo. Spartans are biologically and psychologically enhanced child soldiers that were made to squash rebellions. It's only by chance that they were invaded by the Covenant and began fighting them instead. And for those who aren't aware, basically they were kidnapped as children and replaced by clones that would die soon after due to complications that came up with the cloning process, as was the plan. The Halo universe at least recognizes how evil and messed up the Spartan program was. Typically, whenever a soldier or a civilian finds out the truth, they're disgusted by the entire program. To cover up their part, Oni blames everything on Halsey and she just takes the blame. But the lore doesn't hide the fact that Oni are the real boogeymen, and that they'd gladly do it again if they could maintain their version of order. Yeah, it's a weird bit of side lore that comes up all the way through the last few games, but never actually affects what you're doing. You're essentially on the side of the evil empire all through those games. It's just that you're temporarily fighting an evil theocracy and on a break from massacring small-time rebels. The best movies are the ones where you can understand the antagonist's side and the protagonist isn't perfect. The Jackie Chan movie The Foreigner did this right by displaying many different kinds of terror acts, but ends wrong because Jackie doesn't get his comeuppance. He did a whole bunch of bad stuff and got away for free because he had a sad story, I guess? Trying to stop the bad guy and destroying the entire city in the process. The premise of Captain America: Civil War. In Red Dead 2, you can fake surrender to lawmen. The bloodiest shootout I had, I was trying to surrender. I don't know what happened. I gently bumped a guy with my horse by accident and a lawman saw me, so I got off and put my hands up like, "Sorry, I'll pay the fine," or whatever. I never actually surrendered before, so I didn't know what I was doing. I was just standing there with my hands up, and the two cops kept saying, "Put your hands up," and then they just started blasting. It was a gosh darn bloodbath in the middle of the town. The bounty on me was ludicrous by the time I got out of there. Everything Jack Bauer did. That whole series is just a middle finger to the Geneva Convention. Battlefield, Call of Duty, or any other military game. Wanton destruction, buildings, infrastructure that isn't a direct target, using grenade launchers at close range, giving no quarter or aid to injured combatants, shooting humans directly with a 50 cal and larger weapons, flamethrowers, anything with a tripwire like claymores. Those are usually manually triggered, by the way. Video games and movies always get that wrong. Also, Taken, the first movie. Torture, murder, giving no quarter. This is really common in any media though. The good guys always executing injured enemies. Dressing as the enemy. Most movies. Try playing Spec Ops: The Line if you want a game that's kind of self-aware about it. Oh boy. Also, it probably doesn't count as a war crime, but it definitely wouldn't be allowed. Captain America wearing a flag as a uniform. Flag code says the flag should not be used as bedding, drapery, or worn as clothing, especially uniforms. Killing or finishing off injured enemies. That's kind of a grey area. If they're wounded in the middle of an active combat zone and still have weapons or equipment in hand, then you're probably good. Or if you're assaulting through an area, you can just put rounds into anything that would be a threat. If the fighting is done though, then yeah, you can't just shoot prisoners or the wounded. In Ace Combat 0, you get points for destroying refugee tents. I'm looking at a lot of these other answers, and the one I haven't seen come up yet is mock execution. It's a hugely popular plot device to point a weapon at someone's head and pull the trigger when the chamber was empty, or to push someone off a roof onto a waiting platform or pad or whatever. But convincing someone that they or someone else is going to be killed imminently is a form of torture and thus a crime. Now that you know this, you'll see it everywhere. They're literally called the Dirty Dozen, and the way they dispose of those Third Reich people and their women, by pouring gasoline and grenades onto a bomb shelter, lived up to their name. But war crimes are usually only charged against the losers. It reminds me of what Defense Secretary Robert McNamara said of firebombing civilians in Tokyo in the documentary Fog of War, that they'd realized that if they'd lost the war, the bombing tactics they used would have definitely had them arrested for crimes. The Avengers and S.H.I.E.L.D. violate pretty much everyone's constitutional rights in a majority of the movies. The good in the Good, Bad, and the Ugly movie kills the most people over its runtime. Aragorn beheading the mouth of Sauron in the extended edition of The Return of the King. This is the King of Gondor beheading an unarmed messenger, something Tolkien specifically condemns as vile orc behavior earlier in the novel, and is then brought up again in the Mouth of Sauron chapter, when the Mouth of Sauron claims unassailability and Gandalf rejects it, saying, "The rules of war don't apply in Mordor," but then clarifies that obviously the men of Gondor are better than to murder an ambassador. And then Peter Jackson is like, "Hyuk!" Austin Powers crushed a guy with a steamroller, although that was more of an industrial accident than anything else. Brick killed a guy with a trident. Batman severely beats his victims, breaks bones, causes severe harm with gadgets, regardless of who he's fighting. Sure, the Joker deserves to lose teeth, but what about the random dealer? Does a desperate poor person selling substances to make ends meet in a brutal craphole city like Gotham deserve to be hospitalized? This is a huge theme of the Animorphs series. The main characters contemplate and even go through with mass murder on several occasions, as well as being literal child soldiers, and this isn't even going into the Andalites, who, while supposedly being on the good team, admit to using a virus to wipe out an entire planet to stop the villains from getting its resources. Have you seen Fury? Where do I frickin' begin? Killing prisoners? Looting? Attempted unspeakable act? Still one of the best movies I've seen. Also Band of Brothers. Spears is known for killing unarmed POWs. Jon Snow uses child soldiers against the White Walkers. Definitely not cool. I think in times of extreme urgency, using child soldiers isn't really a war crime. Like, just about everyone's gonna fight if not doing so means your death. It's why so many Soviets fought the Germans so viciously in World War II. It always bothered me that the British sieging a building full of Americans in the Patriot and burning it down with them inside was tremendously bad, but one would applaud William Wallace doing the same to a building full of British in Braveheart. My God, the top 20 answers are all either Saving Private Ryan or Star Wars The Clone Wars. What happened that made you go from stable relationship to, oh, I need a restraining order? We were actually engaged to be married. Then she went on holidays without me and came back pregnant. She then told me, "You've never done anything to prove you really love me. Accept this baby and help me raise it to prove it." I declined and asked her to leave the home that I paid for and that was in my name. She refused, so I made arrangements, cancelled my lease, then left and told her there were 4 days left on the lease, I think. She wailed, "But what am I supposed to do? I don't have a job." After the constant mental beatdown from her, I started suffering from ED at 22 years of age. Eventually, I mustered the courage to leave her. She quickly moved on to someone else who had later become her husband, and called me every week to basically rub it in, saying how much better he was than me, how much bigger he was than me, all that stuff. So I moved out of state, changed my number, never heard from her again. She called my parents and even showed up at their home, but they told her to go away. About 10 years later, my friend ran into an old friend of hers. Apparently, she had been arrested for attacking her own mother, got out of jail, attacked her husband, tried to take her kids from him, was arrested again, and later released. I guess I dodged a huge bullet there. Mine cheated on me the day my dad died. He sliced himself in front of me and then threatened to kill my cat. I was young, dumb, and thought that I was in love and ignored many red flags. As he got more comfortable around me, he let his crazy out. Someone stole his cell phone and he asked me to purchase a shotty for him so that he could go and shoot the person who did it. It took me another 1.5 years to leave. I did try breaking up with him, but he told me that if I ever left, he'd kill everyone I love and then self-delete so I'd know what it was like to be truly alone. That relationship ended up with an order of police protection. He was nuts. We met online, we both had video games in common, and we hit it right off. Fast forward 2 years and we got engaged. All was well, until he started getting violent toward me and our pets. I felt stuck because I couldn't afford to live on my own. Then he went on a business trip and I found a bunch of truly reprehensible adult films containing illegal subject matter hidden on a flash drive. Turned it in, he got arrested. Turns out he was also hiring working girls and stuff. He's in prison now and it's illegal for him to contact me. Oh boy, kinda thought a lot more of these stories would be exaggeration and the restraining orders would be wishful thinking. Turns out we have a bunch of legitimate domestic criminals lined up. Yay! I graduated, she wanted to transfer schools, so we moved to a college town where she told me she had been accepted as a transfer. Turns out the transfer hadn't been accepted, and when she reapplied, that wasn't accepted either. She got a job at Walmart while trying to figure out her next move. After about 2 months, she decided we should move to Pittsburgh. She's convinced this will solve all her problems and make her happy. Except we're in a recession and I just got my first good job. I don't want to move. She became very aggressive. I didn't want to go home. She was constantly negative and on the edge of a screaming fight. I was just avoiding her at the end. We were together 4 years before that, and she was always moody but never prone to these violent outbursts. 6 months of that, she went home to her hometown to take a semester at a local school and stay with her parents. I called her 2 weeks later and told her to not come back. It had been like a weight was lifted from me, and I never wanted to see her again. Listen, I'm glad you got away, but why Pittsburgh? Specific reason? Pittsburgh has magical properties in the water that make all of your troubles go away. I live here, and I know. There's no problems at all. None. Stop looking at me like that. Everything is fine. The weather is perfect. The roads are great. Everyone gets along perfectly fine, I swear. It's great. Everything is wonderful. I moved my ex in way too early. She hated where she was living, and I wanted to help her with her mental state, so it seemed like a good idea at the time. She didn't have a job, so I paid for everything. When she finally did get a job, she'd keep all of the money to herself and then quit out of nowhere after a couple of weeks or so. Slowly but surely, she started mistreating me in pretty much every way apart from the stuff in the bedroom, and like a frog boiling in water, I allowed it to happen by justifying it to myself. I even found out about financial abuse being a thing. You know it's a great relationship when it teaches you about a new form of spousal mistreatment. She used her mental issues to manipulate me into buying her so many things, including a frickin' $600 or $700 laptop. As soon as I ran out of money, we started having problems, and 16 grand in credit card debt later, she broke up with me and continued to live in my apartment for another couple of months. She was on a lease, so I couldn't kick her out because legally, the apartment was hers just as much as it was mine. She finally moved out on my birthday, the last December. I'm still picking up the pieces. I dated someone for almost 3 years, starting back in grade 10 in high school. Everything was great for the first year or so, and he treated me well, and we had some things in common. Didn't realize until after we broke up how much of a grade A neckbeard he actually was. Thought for a while that if we stayed together after high school, we could get married because he was my first relationship and I felt like I loved him so much that I'd marry him. Then about a year and a half into the relationship, he started to show his true colors. His family never had much money, so sometimes I'd help him to pay for stuff. He started to yell and scream if I didn't give him money to buy some game or food that he wanted, and many times he'd embarrass me in the middle of public settings like Walmart. My parents sometimes would also help pay his gas, and that got to a point where he'd come to ask my parents for the money because they hadn't given it to him yet. I didn't want to give him money all the time and even tried calling him out on it. But he'd always scream and yell saying, "How dare I tell him not to take my money, blah blah blah." He generally became emotionally and financially controlling. I didn't know financial abuse was a thing until after we broke up, and the incident that made me really stop loving him was the night he committed the unspeakable act on me. He finally decided that waiting for me to be ready wasn't enough, so he took it. We still dated almost a year after that, but I was just there out of fear of what he'd do if I left him. I finally left him the next year, right before my birthday, after finding out that he'd cheated on me with my now ex-best friend. I wish I'd said something sooner to my parents, but I only told them 3 or 4 years after it happened. Now I hope I never see him again. We were in a long-distance relationship for over 3 years, and eventually it started to fizzle. She'd tell me to move to the States and drop my college degree, my family, and my animals to live as an illegal immigrant, and that I could just do whatever odd jobs I could just to be with her. I told her I needed to wait. She'd get very upset every time I went out with friends and would bombard my Facebook wall with random crap and send me private messages with passive-aggressive insults and threats of her not being alive anymore. I'd travel up there twice a year whenever I had vacations from uni and spend about 2 months with her, which were always great. She'd just get incredibly possessive and insecure when we were apart because my social life started to blossom down here and she was scared I'd meet someone else. Once I stayed for 6 months until the very last day of my visa. I broke things off with her and moved on, but she kept messaging me asking to be friends. I tried, but she'd randomly blow up at me, insulting me for ruining her life by making her think she could be loved. I told her that she did deserve love, and she'd get even more upset. We just couldn't talk at all. Then she messaged me many years afterwards, telling me that I had a legal obligation to marry her since I said I would 5 years ago, and therefore she expected me to just fly up there and fulfill my obligation. Had to block her. I started dating this girl during my junior year of high school. We dated for about 7 or 8 months when she started becoming a huge flirt. I don't judge, but it's not something I could emotionally handle, so I called it off. I started getting closer to one of my best friends as she was a huge support during the breakup, and eventually I caught the feelings. My ex did not like that. Late one night I saw her flexing her dad's 9mm on her Instagram and in the comments saying, "I'll shoot the both of them." I went to the dean's office at school the next day and she got arrested and spent the night in jail. Actually did end up giving a no-contact order. Yep, that's several orders of magnitude beyond a red flag, isn't it? A red roadblock? Anyway folks, when you see your exes moving on, surviving and thriving is the best revenge you can get. Public declarations of oncoming vengeance are much further down the list and not really very sensible. I was dating a guy who was very sweet in the beginning. After about 6 months, he got possessive. He didn't trust me. An example of this was one night I told him I was meeting a friend I used to work with at a bar about a block away. We lived in a safe area and it was a short walk. Her name sounded like it could be male or female, but I assured him she was a she. He showed up at the bar while we were there and it made him look very insecure. He began tracking my phone's GPS. I found out when I stopped at a relative's house after work on my way home and he freaked out and called my mum. She actually knew that was where I was and he had a very hard time believing I wasn't cheating. The last straw was my first week at a new job. I worked nights and had my phone. I got this long-winded email regarding an innocent comment on a Facebook selfie of me. There were screenshots of it and a huge manifesto about why my buddies online all wanted to take me away from him. After I broke up with him, I got emails for months swinging between apologies and telling me I was awful. I also got a variety of emails from fake addresses, all concerning him. It was insane. Started dating in high school, had some ups and downs, but at the time I just chalked it up to us being immature. My last 2 years of college really proved that he had some serious issues. When I moved out of state for good, it was like a switch flipped and he got extremely possessive and controlling. He wanted all of my friends' numbers, gave me a schedule of when we need to be in communication, and if I missed any of it, he was blowing up my phone with threats of self-deletion. Finally got the restraining order when he showed up to my friend's apartment looking for me, threatening to call the police because I still had a pair of his shoes, which I didn't even have. I found out that he was attempting to solicit minors. Like a record scratch, it was over. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. This is about my sister. She and her ex dated on and off in high school. At some point in the 8th grade, he admitted he was in love with her, and she admitted she had feelings for him too, so they started dating in the 10th grade. I told her something was off about him. I'm not necessarily an intuitive person. I try my hardest not to judge a situation too quickly, but something about this guy just rubbed me the wrong way. They dated for about 6 months, and he began showing signs of a behavior that really set the alarm bells ringing. Like others have stated, he began calling her and keeping tabs on her. He demanded to know when she made it home and when she went to sleep. He demanded that she edit her social media, MySpace at the time, to include pictures of them and only them so everyone knew that they were together. She visited me in hospital. I had severe stomach flu. Something wasn't right and she told me she wanted to break up with him. She told me she was a bit scared of the guy. He was big, maybe 6'4" and about 230 pounds. My mum begged her to end it with him and she did. The calls kept pouring in for about 2 weeks and she did her best to avoid him. Once I was back in school, I happened to catch an encounter between the two of them. He had her pinned against her locker, telling her she wasn't leaving until they talked things out. I told him to back off and he threatened me, and then she threatened him. He stormed off, punched a locker, broke 2 of his fingers, and then dropped it for a little while. He popped up a few years later on the morning of my sister's wedding with a love letter. We're not sure how he knew she was getting married. We'd all had him blocked on social media. The letter was mailed to our home, which she no longer lived in. He hasn't come around anymore, but honestly, I would not put it past him. My sister's husband is an avid hunter, so that might be what's keeping him away. I'll throw my hat into the ring here. I dated a girl years ago. She was essentially everything I thought I wanted in a girl. She was cute, funny, liked just enough things I liked for us to have common interests, but just different enough to show each other new things and experiences. I was heavy into her and she was heavy into me. Then things got weird. She started getting jealous of high school friends I'd known way before her, and even went as far as telling me I wasn't allowed to hang out with some of my female friends, except for the few she thought were uglier than her. And things got worse. She started getting jealous of inanimate objects like my game consoles and video games, some of which she gave me. It came to a head when my grandmother asked me to watch her dog. It was a tiny little hand dog that I adored, and one day I was half asleep and saw her literally kick this tiny dog off my bed with her feet. I asked her what the hell her problem was, and she told me that she doesn't like that I give the dog more attention than her. Things got even worse. She'd physically bully me in little ways when I did things she didn't like, such as bending my fingers or hitting me in the face, stuff like that. Eventually, everything I did she didn't like. After a while, I got the courage to dump her, and she tried to tell me she was pregnant to keep me, which was an obvious lie. After that, I discovered she'd still stalk my Facebook page and told some of her friends and our mutual friends that I was mistreating her. I also learned that when I was away, she'd let dudes feel her up and other stuff too. Luckily, I've landed a great girl that cares about me and isn't a jealous psycho like my ex was. Yeah, this is pretty dangerous. This sort of person seems to happen across both genders, and I suppose you can just be thankful that she was presumably limited in how far she could go with the physical violence, although I might just be assuming that she was smaller. You really can't win. You can either get an awful guy who's more likely to have a physical advantage, or someone who can fake a pregnancy and claim you forced them to do things. Lose-lose. Just run when bad people of either gender show their true colors, I guess. I was dating a guy. I really liked him. He was smart, funny, adventurous. We were getting pretty serious. He pretty much lived at my house. One weekend I went home for my dad's birthday. All of my brothers were home. I have 5 of them. We ate, drank, and were merry. One of my sister-in-laws took some pictures and posted them on Facebook with me tagged in them. Got back to my house Sunday evening and my boyfriend was coming over shortly to hang out and spend the night. When he got there, he was basically frothing at the mouth. He shoved me and called me a working girl. Started pushing me around, ranting about how he had to see me making seductive poses all over the internet and hanging out with a bunch of guys. I told him they were my brothers, but at that point, I was already done with him. I told him to get the F out of my house. He took that as an invitation to throw me up against a wall and try to force me to kiss him. My roomie heard the commotion and came out of her room with a baseball bat. That moron made the only good decision he had made that day and decided to leave. Kicked in a pantry door and wrecked some drywall on his way out. I threw all of his stuff in a dumpster. He ended up stalking me for years, showing up drunk at places I'd moved to after we'd dated, calling after I'd changed my number, even texted me on the week of my wedding to ask me to reconsider marrying him instead. Yeah, you crazy F, I want to dump the love of my life for a crazy stalker. We were spending a large amount of time together, with me staying at his house several nights of the week. He went mad one day because he said we weren't spending enough time together. He pulled out a notepad and drew up a schedule outlining in excruciating detail each hour that I'd spend with him throughout the week from then on. I distinctly remember sitting there, saying nothing and feeling like I was in the Twilight Zone. Things got significantly crazier from then on, but that moment always stuck out in my mind. The worst version I have of this was a guy who I'd been dating who rammed my truck with a moving van repeatedly at an immigration checkpoint in New Mexico well after dark. He thought it was funny. He had been behaving badly, but I thought it was just the stress of the move. The aggravated attack by U-Haul is when I decided to break up with him. He stalked me for years after that, pestering me at work, which led to me getting fired. I switched from law firm to legal software, and that seemed to make it harder to find me. His stalking ended with him blowing up a brick-and-mortar mailbox with plastic explosives. I think he laid low after that because the FBI were after him. He eventually moved back to California years later. An ex-girlfriend of his contacted me about 7 years later when she was settling his estate. She wanted to make sure there weren't any children. Started dating not long after a previous relationship. At first, everything was amazing and I did everything for this girl. For my 21st birthday, we went to Alton Towers with 2 of my friends, 1 boy and 1 girl. We stayed over at the hotel. We were all in the same room having a drink and a laugh when suddenly my girlfriend stormed out of her room for no reason. Rightly so, I follow her back to our room to ask what's up. Before I could even finish my sentence, she punched me square in the face, gets me to the floor, and then kicks me about 5 or 6 times. I ask why, and it's because I'm apparently always looking at my friend, the female one. Anyway, in the morning we set off home and I assumed all was well. We drop my friends off and as I pull up to her house, she puts her feet on my windscreen and kicks it 3 or 4 times, cracking it. Not sure why I stayed with her for a month after this as she scratched my face repeatedly when I accepted an old school friend on Facebook. I started dating this amazing girl, but she was just getting out of a very traumatic marriage and I was her first female partner. She started showing up at my work with flowers and coffee, which was sweet, but I'd never told her where my office was. Then she started showing up at my house at all hours and would get upset when I needed to sleep. I worked graveyard shifts. She then wanted me to meet her daughters, which I wasn't comfortable with because we were in the first stages of a relationship. I decided to break it off. She was just too needy, which was understandable coming from someone who'd just left an awful relationship and discovered their sexuality, but I wasn't the person that could guide her. She decided that I was just afraid of love and started leaving books of poetry on my porch and leaving long letters in my mailbox. I finally had to call law enforcement after I came home to her in my bed. She had taken a ladder to my second-story room window, I lived with roommates, and she had broken in. I found her undressed in my bed, covered in blood from several intentional incisions. She proceeded to tell me that I was the only thing keeping her alive. I cut off all contact, but I truly hope that she's gotten some help and is doing well. She was a wonderful woman, but so broken. It's good of you to be able to see her qualities. A lot of us would have had a very hard time seeing the positives in someone after finding them bleeding out in our bed, and possibly thinking that they'd passed away there. That's a super scary image. I hope she got the help she needed. My relationship with my ex in uni seemed really great. He loved me a lot and was super attentive. I even went on holiday with his family at some point, and I thought we'd marry eventually and start a family. Long story short, when I got busy with school, the final year, and didn't see him as often, he started getting clingy and jealous of everyone, including my female friends. I tried to break up with him probably 3 times before he accepted it. I explained how I wanted to focus on my studies, and the situation wasn't good for either of us. The last time he seemed to understand my point, and we remained friends. This also didn't last long, and he eventually started stalking me online and in person, and constantly bothering my friends. He managed to go to my senior year party, even though he wasn't in my year. Eventually he texted me calling me a skank and that I'd cheated on him, all the usual accusations. He told this to all of our mutual friends in uni, so that was fun. He acted like a total lunatic, begging for me to reconsider a friendship after that, but obviously there was no chance of that. The last straw was him showing up at the graduation ceremony, making it awkward for me and all of my family. She punched me in the face while I was sleeping. Apparently, my phone had woken her up when I received a text in the middle of the night from a girl asking if there was any chance I could come pick her up. My girlfriend assumed I was cheating and figured that the most efficient way of addressing her concerns was just to punch me in the face, hard, while I lay there sleeping. The text was from a non-Alabamian cousin who had some sort of semi-emergency and needed to get picked up from a party. He pushed a little girl in a store because she tried to pet his emotional support dog. Instead of just picking up the dog, he laid hands on a little girl. There's a lot more to that, but that one sticks out the most. I recently found out he was arrested again. Did your high school crush age like a fine wine or burn out like a bright star? Mine had a roller coaster of a life. I admire him more now than ever, and more than most people I know, but I can't wrap my head around why I ever found him physically attractive. Maybe it was just always his heart. By age 25, he had a PhD, a wife, and was captain in the Navy. By 30, he had 2 PhDs, a small business where he made a metric butt-ton of money, and his wife was preggers. By 31, he was diagnosed with stage 4 skin cancer that swiftly spread to his lymph nodes, bones, esophagus, and a few other places. He was told he had a minimal chances of making it more than 5 years. Even with the best health insurance money can buy, it still basically wiped him out. 7 years later, he's living a comfortable but not extravagant life as a civilian contractor for the Navy. Same wife and 2 happy, healthy kids, and spends most of his free time advocating for better public healthcare. I remember walking up to her and asking if we could talk in private. She said, "You can say what you need to in front of everyone else." Her group of friends was all around us. So I asked if she wanted to go on a date. She burst out laughing and said, no. It was rough, man. Looked her up last year and she's a cage fighter now. Mine, unfortunately, decided to not be alive anymore. Found out later she had a crush on me as well. Frick life sometimes. They began acting. It's weird. Every so often I'll see a commercial or something and be like, "Oh, hey, I know them." My crush is an incredibly sweet person, so I'm happy for them. I had 2 unrealized crushes in high school. One is a teacher and musician. She's married and has either 1 or 2 kids. We've kept in loose contact via social media and ran into each other at a New Year's Eve party shortly before she got married. I was introduced to her now husband as her favorite ex ever. He seemed like a decent guy and I'm happy for her. I believe the other crush became a US attorney. I haven't heard from her since Google Plus almost became a social media thing. I imagine she's still very productive and would be disappointed in my life choices. He's an attractive gay man, and I am none of those things. Same with my crush. He was my first serious crush and my first slow dance at a middle school dance. Now he's gay, attractive, was in the military, and owns a photography studio. He does some great headshots. My English teacher still looks fine as F. You know, I had wondered how many of these answers would be teachers, and that's our first confirmed one. We've had other people say that they had crushes who are teachers now, but I'm not sure if they were teachers or students at the time of said crush. My only girlfriend in high school was my crush. Her mum banned her from dating me after about a year because my girlfriend admitted to her mum that we were fooling around. This was about 20 years ago. She's still living with her mum, no kids, and as far as I know, never dated seriously after her mum broke us up. Still has the same job from high school too. It's like her mum went way into protective overdrive and my former girlfriend never got to grow up. It's really sad. I met her in 1987. We got married 5 years ago. We used to go to the same punk shows, that's where we met. Mine was my best friend. She turned out to be a criminal. She always liked younger guys, like when she was 17 and had a 13-year-old boyfriend, which was odd, but we were kids and didn't think about it much. Turns out her tastes didn't age with her and it became legally problematic. Found her on Tinder and she said I was hot. Pointed out that I was a loser that she used to know in high school. Had a big laugh. Been a little over a year, now we send each other memes and hang out occasionally when the pandemic isn't being a hassle. She's still hot, successful and a wealthy entrepreneur and married someone with the same first name as me who quit his job to brew beer. I crushed on her for a bit. Didn't think she was interested, so I dated other people. Then came to find out she crushed on me senior year, I was too dumb and blind, we connected freshman year of college, and she wrote me letters, and by the time I wised up, she'd moved on. Nobody to blame but myself. Dead by 32. Don't do substances, kids. You know, just seeing this is making me wonder what I ever saw in them. His friend unalived him over a girl. I had a childhood friend, he and I both had the same name, so we called each other by first name, last initial. He got killed in a similar fashion. He was only 24. It was freaking senseless, and the guy who killed him is going away for a long time. Was it worth it, buddy? I was a freshman and had a crush on a senior. To add to it, she was a cheerleader and her brother played quarterback for the football team, and got a college scholarship. She showed up at a football game a couple of years later with a baby in tow. She's married now and back in her hometown. That's about all I know. They both ended up as great guys. One has a huge family and is a minister. The other one only has one child and is a college professor. Both married nice people and they seem happy. They were really good guys in high school and ended up being really good adults. I've got both of them on Facebook and we keep in touch peripherally as we stayed friends over the years. I don't know about you guys, but I had way too many crushes in high school to be able to follow any one of them. Yeah, I had a lot of crushes, but the one that stands out was two sisters who both ended up becoming doctors. I did not become a doctor. An insanely talented molecular biology researcher at Boston, and she's still insanely attractive. Okay, people are writing to me and it looks like a lot of people feel like they know the same person. It's crazy how many hot molecular biologists people know. My crush is about to be my fiancé if all goes well. Became a professional cheerleader, died of cancer at 34. Googling names from high school is crazy. My first high school crush who sat next to me in freshman year English was a really cute punk rock girl, and she's gone on to become an incredibly hot fitness model. Haha, my husband. Our first marriages didn't work out and we reconnected after our divorces. If only I would have confessed I had a crush on him in high school, might have saved myself a lot of trouble. Huh. My crush is still hot as F. Yep, they still don't know you exist either. I briefly worked with mine and didn't realize it was her until I left for another job. She looked almost unrecognizable, but it was 15 years after I last saw her. She's married with a couple of kids now, so pretty standard life, I guess. My friend's high school crush was Tom Holland, like they went to the same school. I never made a move in high school. About 7 years after graduating, I saw her on social media and said, "What the hell?" and asked her out. We've been dating for about 2 years and I'm about to pop the big question. This hot D-bag who doesn't really do much except to go to the gym. To be fair, that's how he was in high school, I just liked it back then. If you wanted to always date Chip Matthews from high school, you're gonna end up on a date with Chip Matthews from high school. Yeah, isn't it weird how some of the winners from school end up peaking there and then unless they're capable of change? I know a lot of former people who might have been described as losers in school whose quality of life and status has changed so drastically once they move to a different environment. So don't lose hope in school, kids. Back when I was younger and crushing hard, I got on AOL Instant Messenger and had gotten my crush's screen name from a friend. I worked up the nerve to start a conversation with him, and soon after some awkward small talk, he sent me a message in Comic Sans, black background, red lettering, and in French. I then went to Google for translation and found out he'd just called me a pig in French. Being a seemingly awkward and chubby teenager, I was literally crushed. The heartbreak was only made worse by remembering that a few weeks prior, I'd selected to take French class the next year and couldn't change it. Years later, now that I've blossomed, he follows me on every social media platform and has reached out a couple of times to try and flirt or hang out. Hard pass, man. I believe he's now moved away and is a teacher. I ended things a few years after high school. She was a teacher and got caught having an affair with a female student. Took too many substances and unfortunately passed away last year. I got to see him before he was taken off life support with a really good mutual friend we shared, who was an organ donor too. It was surreal seeing him dwarfed by all these machines. He had one of the largest hearts I've ever come across. She ended up getting knocked up by a freshman shortly after we graduated. She passed away our senior year, 6 months after she agreed to marry me after we graduated. She's still a 10 for looks. I'm sure she kept on as the amazing, kind person that she was. She moved to another country, speaks multiple languages, and is more successful than I imagined. Seems happy, but we haven't talked since the time I told her how I felt about 20 years ago. Went on to be a teenaged model for hair products, graduated from Yale, toured Europe, opened her own successful ceramics company that's sold worldwide, and is often written up in magazines. Makes me feel like crap every time I think of her. Going to an all-boys school sucks for having realistic crushes. However, I ran into one of the teachers years later, and she still looks bellissima. I checked when I saw the question, and she's actually a very successful artist and an art teacher from a renowned university in France. She even got decorated for her work, Chevalier des Arts et des Lettres. It's a big deal award. My high school ex randomly sent me a text years after we split up that went, "I know you don't like metal, but I thought you would like this," and a link to a clarinet cover of a metal song. I played clarinet in high school. Little did he know that I hated playing clarinet and was now a total metalhead. My crush has a dog and I don't. There was a girl I really admired for a while. She didn't really give me the time of day after freshman year though. She was co-valedictorian and hugged me as I crossed the stage at graduation, and nobody else got a hug. I'm still really confused about that 6 years later. She went on to med school and is either married or at least engaged to a guy she met there. Overall, she's doing really well and I'm happy for her. Sounds like she's a nice person and probably knew you liked her, but didn't want to give you the wrong idea. She probably hugged you because she hoped for the best for you. You were her #1 fan. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I had several. One of them's still a close friend and he became a primary care doctor. He also officiated my wedding. There's another one who I have no idea what happened to. We didn't really have overlapping friend groups and she doesn't do social media. One of them is a math professor now, so that's pretty cool. But my biggest crush in high school was my longtime neighbor, but it also fizzled out pretty quickly after we went to homecoming together. We're still good friends and our families still keep in touch. He's also the guy who introduced me to my husband. I had 3. 1 from the first 2 years and 2 from the last 2. The first one is now female to male trans, who walked to Colorado to join a cult or commune. He's now in Arizona recording rap albums. The second girl moved to Florida and lives in a swamp. She periodically hits me up to tell me she misses me and how dumb I was that I didn't follow through and that we should get married. The third was a missionary. She wasn't really into it once she grew up, came back home, and I introduced her to one of my closest friends. They've been married for 15 years. 0 out of 3. Why didn't you marry Shrek, the second one? Hedge fund manager with a trophy wife. She turned out great. She married me. We actually met in kindergarten. We reconnected through Facebook in our late 40s. Now I can't stand Facebook anymore. Now she's my wife. She's still beautiful. One I don't keep track of at all. I'm not sure what she's up to. The other one I married, she turned out awesome. I'm just checking in to confirm that I was no one's high school crush, and carry on. Ditto. Nobody's written about a YouTube narrator with a weird accent yet. One day, narrator. One day. Still super hot, she married some loser and has a few kids with him. That loser was me. We just celebrated 22 years of marriage. One I don't keep track of at all. I'm not sure what she's up to. The other I married. She turned out awesome. Blink twice if you're being held hostage. She worked with the Obama administration, I forget in what capacity. Got married to some politician's son. I don't remember and don't care to look it up. She's happy and that's the only thing that matters. Oh, she was also our school's valedictorian. She was so busy with her job that she couldn't organize our high school reunion, so that's a plus. I wasn't head over heels for her, I admired her, but I knew I wasn't for her. Then there's another crush of mine. We ran into each other years after graduation at a grocery store. After talking, I asked her out to dinner at my house. I pull out all of the stops, I buy rainbow trout fillet and make up all the fixings. 6:30 rolls around, I open the door, and who the hell is that man behind her? Oh, this is my fiancé. She'd neglected to tell me she was bringing him. Turns out they wanted to sell me on some multi-level marketing thing. She tried to cross the threshold, I put my arm out and asked them politely to leave. I turned away from the door and had my saddest meal that I've ever eaten in my life. Pretty good. Seems to have her life together, although she had a few setbacks. She's gone back to uni since job prospects in her field kinda sucked, but seems to be really enjoying it. She's dating me though, so clearly her judgment sucks. I found out she was fat and unattractive. Then I realized I was too. He turned out pretty well, joined the military and served for a number of years. He was in after Vietnam and out before the Gulf War, so I'm not sure if he actually saw much active duty. He then settled in Korea where he trained in Taekwondo and did a lot of professional fighting and won a bunch of awards, attained the rank of Grand Master and returned to the US and opened a very successful school that specializes in Taekwondo and Hapkido. He's opened additional locations and is currently looking to open one in our old hometown. I imagine that will have to wait until after COVID. I had a few in high school. One ended up moving away after sophomore year and nobody knew why. She reached out to me when I had a mental breakdown online and said that she could understand what I was going through. Some effed up crap happened to her, though she never said what specifically. I didn't ask further because it wasn't my business to pry. I'm not sure how she is now. Another one got super hot after high school and she did a degree in science. Again, not sure where she is now, but I think she's doing alright. And the third works at a bank. We ended on bad terms. Partially my fault. I found out she was making fun of me behind my back and had done so for months beforehand, so I sent her an angry message. I haven't seen her since then. Still cute as heck, one of the kindest and most sensitive people I know, and still one of my best friends 15 years later. He also recently divorced. His wife was gay, but needed time and support to come to terms with it. Now he and I are slowly testing the waters. What started as a crush has matured into a deep and rich friendship, and however it might unfold, I'm so grateful to have that relationship in my life. That's how I got my husband. His wife left him for his best friend. Obviously, he was going through a divorce after, and we became best friends. We were always good friends, but it got so much better and we fell in love. It's been 10 years and I can't believe I married such a little hottie. Good luck! She was aware of the crush then, over 30 years ago, but it was unrequited. We've been in casual contact through her Facebook for the past several years, and once before that, my wife at the time, and I had her and her husband over for dinner. From what I can tell, she's grown into a person I probably would have been happy with. It's nice to see my high school perspective got a few things right. I think we'd be good friends if we lived closer. She appears to be living a good life with her husband and family. With my second wife, I'm happier than I could have ever imagined. Life worked out well. Turns out I was attracted to losers and burnouts. That hasn't changed much. Turns out he's gay and got fired from a teaching job for having inappropriate behavior with his male students. Ugh, mine are all stunning and wildly successful. One in particular was a crush with a similar name to mine, dating back from my elementary school, which turned out to be the longest crush, an entire decade, and still appearing in a looping dream sequence to this day. Especially after that bitter and frankly traumatic rejection before we parted ways when I confessed to her. At that point, we were classmates for 5 years and were going to different schools. After the separation, that's when the dreams began, and every time I woke up I was feeling emotional all over again. It took me another painful 5 years before I stopped crushing on her, but the dreams never stopped. Just last week I had an update to the dream sequence where we actually talked for the first time in a decade of Groundhog Day levels of dreams. I know, it's pathetic. Life update on that particular crush though. She's currently aspiring to be an architect and had an equally cool boyfriend, so I doubt she ever looked back on her past as much as I do. I recently tried to follow her on her socials to get a life update from herself, but she won't accept my requests, so I'm not going to force her. She's a TikTok influencer who shaved off her eyebrows and draws symbols on her face. Yeah. One is still active duty in the military and has a very successful career as an officer. I hope she continues. The other is successful in the arts, and I hope she continues to be that as well. Both are married to others who treat them well. I'm happy that they're both happy. My life is still going good here, so I have no hard feelings. She married some idiot and had my babies. Man, I hope you can get your babies back. Best of luck! Yeah, I was about to say, either this is very sweet or you have very much wronged some other poor guy. If it's the latter, I hope you, your crush, and the hapless fellow in question can sort out an agreement regarding your illegitimate offspring. The guy I crushed on for 2.5 years did not end up turning out great. I'm still friends with his younger sister, so I know that he's recently acquired his 3rd DUI and his 2nd divorce. He's currently living in his friend's basement and occasionally works for his friend's moving company as a mover, but only when he feels like it. He spends all of his money on booze and owes the 2 mums of his 5 kids tons of child support. But man, was he hot in high school. My second crush in high school is the only reason I got over my first crush. He's currently doing great, mostly because he gets to be married to me for going on 20 years. Harvard, degrees in writing and medicine, became a lead surgeon in a major city. Extremely proud of her. Always had her on a pedestal, I guess with good reason. One of them is homeless and a substance addict. It's very sad. The other one is famous in his home country, is a best-selling author, and is regularly on TV. Don't have a crush on him anymore, but I'm glad we're still friends, and I'm happy for how well he's done. I guess they balance each other out. Multiple degrees, on track to becoming a full-time educator, mother of 2, and my wife. I'm so lucky. Turned out to be gay. So did I. It worked out perfectly. Divorced with 2 kids. I took her and her kids to lunch after meeting her in a mall one day. I hadn't seen her in over 10 years. We caught up on some small talk and I asked the kids if they were hungry, and they said yes. I just wanted to spend more time with her. After lunch, I asked if I could see her again, and she laughed at me and said, "I could never go out with someone like you." She said the exact same thing to me in high school. That's my life. I'm not good enough for anyone. Nah, dude, screw that. I get not being attracted to someone, but saying it like that is super messed up. Especially after you've fed her kids. Like at least say, let's be friends, or something. He's still hot, got a part-time scholarship to study engineering, and is now dating a Miss Spain runner-up. She's bi and married a woman. She's a speech therapist now. Still really good looking and still a nice person. I'm happy her life turned out well. A racist person who has 3 kids with 3 different women. I'm glad I was too shy to ever make a move on him. Mine is just the same as when we were leaving school. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why he is an ex. What happened when you found the secret room in your home? I found the secret space in my closet when my mum and I were moving out of the house where she was renting to move into my stepdad's house. I never noticed it because junk covered the section of the wall that was covering a small entrance to a room that was sealed off with boards and plywood. I couldn't pry it open, but I could see light shining in and a single mason jar filled with what I assumed was water. The air was cold in there, like as if the central heating didn't even reach that part. I showed it to my mum and she told me that she doesn't remember seeing that there when we moved in 8 years prior, but since we were moving out, it didn't matter. The room gave me the creeps for whatever reason. I don't know why it was sealed off or why there was a single mason jar filled with water in the center of the room. I lived in a warehouse in Melbourne. Always thought it would be cool to get on the roof, but there was no access. After about 6 months, I'm standing in front of a mirror upstairs when I notice it has hinges. I push on it, clicks and opens out, revealing a small attic and roof hatch. That was pretty cool. Used to sit up there and watch the sunset over the city. It wasn't a room, but after living in our house for a few years, we decided to remodel the basement bathroom. Tore out the old shower enclosure and found a window behind it. Said window was covered on the outside by an apron of siding that came from the cantilevered room upstairs all the way down to the concrete pad. We tore off the siding apron and let some light in. It was much better. We were doing a bathroom reno as well, but also there was a covered window because you could still see the window from the outside. Ripped off the shower enclosure and now we have a nice window in our bathroom. Why people would cover up a window leaves me confused. We moved into a house with a door in the kitchen that could not be opened. The real estate tried but failed, assumed it led to the laundry room but was walled off. My older siblings, like any typical teenagers, were not convinced about this and were determined to open it. It was just a normal pantry, but they never told our mother that they managed to get the door open and used to hide things like alcohol, smokes, and green herb. Watched Home Alone and saw the attic that Macaulay Culkin was staying in and wondered if we had one in our townhouse. Ran around with a stepladder until I found it in my mum's closet. Got my tiptoes on the stepladder and fought the door open. It ended up being a big piece of plywood. And then I peered into the attic. A mouse colony stared back. It was like that scene in Ratatouille. Decades worth of mouse droppings covering the entire space. My mum wasn't happy once I told her. We moved shortly afterwards. Oh god. That feels like one of those things you close up and hope like heck people don't discover while they're viewing the house. Mouse infestation might take you down a bit in value. Also, they're too cute for me to exterminate with a clean conscience. My parents bought a house from an old family member to help her pay for nursing home care. She hadn't lived in the house for years at that point. She was a hoarder and we were tasked with cleaning up the house over the course of the summer in order to make it livable prior to the start of school. Rat carcasses fused to the carpet, old tax documents from the 60s, Well, we were scraping up the linoleum tiling, covering the original hardwood floor, disappointingly enough, in a side room when I made the joke about the previous resident being a secret mass killer and that there was a trapdoor under the linoleum full of dead bodies. Pulled up a huge section of tiling, only to find a trapdoor underneath. Scared the crap out of me, but when we finally built up enough courage to open the damned thing, we discovered there was nothing under there. It was a walled-off section of the basement with a dirt floor. We suspect it was an old root cellar from back when farmers had to store their crap in a cold, dark place to prevent it from spoiling. A couple of years ago, I rented an apartment that was in a massive old architecture-style building. No idea how old it was. I remember when I did the showing, they showed me a door that had an elaborate staircase that went straight up to the ceiling and explained that it went to the attic, which was sealed up. When I was finally moving out, curiosity got the best of me and I pushed on the panel at the top of the stairs until it popped open and I hoisted myself up there. It was completely dark and the floor was covered in at least an inch of dust, and I found out that it was an entire extra floor to my unit. There was some old rotting furniture and magazines littered throughout the rooms. I eventually found a small hole in one of the walls that went into the sealed-off upstairs of the unit next to mine, and I decided to go through that one too. I found a smaller hole at the back end of that area that led to the next one. I eventually made my way through about 5 or 6 of these sealed-off spaces that had no entrances save these small holes in the drywall. The further I went in, the older the furniture I found. Fridges from the 50s or earlier, old dishware, and so much dust over everything. The last unit was the most interesting. Hand-painted scenes on the walls and holes to the attic letting sunlight stream in. I took small videos, but they're all on Snapchat, so they're hard to post. I must have been up there for hours just exploring alone in the dark. I was pretty lucky to have the only room with access up there. When clearing out my grandma's house, I found a small door in the wall of the basement that led to a tiny room. According to my mother, that's where they hid the family heirlooms when thieving relatives came to town. I was mostly interested in the fact that it was covered in scribbles from my mum and her sisters growing up. Back in college, some friends and I rented an old mansion that had been built in the early 1920s by an elderly lady. The place was falling apart, but it was huge and rent was dirt cheap. About 2 years into living there, I went to the basement to do some laundry and momentarily lost balance, reaching out to steady myself on one of the wall panels. It flexed more than I expected, and after some inspection, I found that it was removable. Behind it was a small, mostly empty, very dirty concrete room about 100 square feet. I say mostly empty because right in the middle there was a hole the size of a well that had been previously bricked up. It must have been old because the bricks had eroded at some point and exposed some of the hole, maybe 2 feet in diameter out of the full 5 feet. After calling my friends down to look at it, I got the courage to creep a little closer and peered down into it. There was another room, roughly the same size but deep, maybe 15 feet down and mostly dirt. We shined a flashlight into it, and I could swear there was a teddy bear at the bottom. Unfortunately, despite plenty of bargaining, none of us were ever able to work up the courage, liquid or regular, to tie a rope and climb down for a closer look, especially after we noticed that the bricks which I thought had fallen in were all accounted for, scattered around the hole as if something had broken outwards. At the risk of this account being discovered by my friends, this was in Pittsburgh. We did a little research, and I think the sub-basement might have been related to prohibition, but honestly, I'm just willing to accept that explanation in order to avoid lifelong nightmares of creatures bursting out. My friend had a thing like this in their basement in Boston. They called it the Hole, and we had weird hole-themed parties. Helping my granddad move house, we accidentally found access to the underfloor area. Not even big enough to really call a crawl space, I don't think. Spotty memory. There was a small pile of trash from the 60s or 70s. Juice cans, chocolate bar wrappers, and crumpled newspapers, and bits of discarded construction debris and some broken tools. We think it must have been used by the builders in lieu of a trash can. It was cool, an accidental time capsule. It was about a year into owning our house. We actually found 2 secret rooms. One was just a room under the stairs that was closed off. Had some toys from the 70s in it. The really crazy one was when we redid the insulation in our attic. One of the workers asked if I knew there was a room up there. I had no idea. So he cut open the drywall and there were stacks on stacks of boxes from the 60s. Like a ton of boxes, and they were all full. So I opened them up expecting some cool stuff, and they were frickin' full of pine cones. One of the biggest bummers of my life. Moved into an 18th century farmhouse as a little kid and found a small panel door in the back of the large closet in my small room. Turned out to be a small finished room over the eaves that had a small portal window. I spent hours in that room reading and hiding from the world. I think any child would love to have this. Honestly, I think most adults, including the narrator, would love to have it too. I might even have put my recording booth in there, although actually it sounds like it has too much cozy reading potential. Thank goodness your family never counted the windows. There was a hidden door behind the wallpaper. Obviously, the doorknob had been taken off, so it blended in with the wall. We lived in this house for 6 years, and I found out about this door in our hallway 2 years ago when we opened it up and I saw a skeleton in the corner. I'm not going to lie, that scared me shirtless, although it was just a prop left by the past owners of our house. It was probably left there to scare the crap out of you when you found it as a joke. While installing Cat 5e network cables many years ago in my house, I discovered a short and squat cast iron water heater inside some walls, between a staircase and a bathroom, connecting the basement and the next level of our house. I'm guessing whoever did the remodel didn't think that the little bit of space that could be reclaimed was worth it. I found it when I realized my measurements weren't making sense and I couldn't figure out why I wasn't seeing my Ethernet cable. I had to plot everything out carefully because of the split-level nature of my house, the crawl spaces, the basements, stuff like that. I figured there was 3 feet of space unaccounted for. It will probably be removed when we remodel the basement bathroom. I figure I can either get more storage space or a full bathtub instead of just a shower stall that's there now. Growing up, my dad's hoarding was pretty bad and my childhood home was pretty old. Around my pre-teens, I started trying to navigate through the clutter to parts of the house I'd truly never seen because of all the junk. I found this door that had been blocked off, and I eventually moved stuff around enough that I could open the door, which was hard because the room was big, but he filled it so much that the only way to navigate it was a single narrow path through the clutter. Behind the door was trippy to me as a kid, because the back couple of rooms in the house were rotted and collapsed in places, so my parents just blocked it off, I guess. Going from my packed house to this completely empty, collapsing ruin was actually really interesting to me. I used to try and navigate through it until one day I fell through the floor and landed underneath the house, with my head a couple of inches from a nail pointing up from the ground. I don't remember if I ever went back through the door after that. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Not quite a secret room or space, but when my parents were doing renovations on our childhood home, the house was roughly 100 years old at the time, they found an old safe, quite small, in the wall that had been left open with a bottle of either port or rum and a long faded note inside. The builder helping Dad said it was common to find the odd bottle of alcohol in walls during renos on old homes, as there was a tradition for a while where one homeowner leaves a hidden bottle for the next to find during a time of construction or renovations. We couldn't determine how old the bottle was, as all of the labeling had faded, but Dad went and bought a new bottle of port and put it in the old safe with a laminated note before sealing it back up for the next owner to find. My old house was a duplex. There was a hobbit-sized door on the bottom floor, and I glanced in there a few times but only saw pipes and different electrical units and stuff. There was some sort of landlord's, maybe past residents junk in the corner. After a few years, I explored behind it and realized it led to the other half of the duplex. We bought a house that had been built in the 1880s, lived in it for 7 years and then had to have some wiring work done. The electrician was working down in the basement and wanted to drill through a brick wall to the outside for some reason that I no longer remember. We gave him the okay and go about our business. He starts drilling and then stops, comes upstairs and tells us he's just found a bricked up room and what do we want to do about it. Well, we still kind of want our wiring situation taken care of, but if there's a body and some amontillado in there, I definitely want to know. On the other hand, I don't want to let my sister's boyfriend knock the wall down with a sledgehammer. As we're discussing this, the electrician offers to run a scope through the hole he's just drilled so we can take a look without doing more damage, or as he put it, destroying evidence. So, our new friend gets his scope set up and we all go down to the basement and watch the monitor. It's a very small space, maybe 3 by 5 feet. Nothing in there but a really old, gross-looking plushie. Not a teddy bear, maybe a dog? It was sewed out of some kind of patterned fabric in a vaguely dog-like shape. That's it, nothing else. The electrician asks us what we want to do. I ask if he can seal the hole he just drilled because this is definitely how ghost movies start. He agreed and patched it up. Drilled somewhere else, finished the rewiring, and we all continued our lives. We moved out 2 years later, and as far as I know, Haunted Doggy is still bricked up in the basement of that house. Found it moving in. Latch at the bottom of the corner of the closet. Cape Cod-style house, crawl space to basically uncarpeted room with 2 windows over garage. I fell through one time. Hidden closet in a basement wall after 20 years of living in this home. We found some personal documents with no real interest, a newspaper from the day after Pearl Harbor, and a hand-drawn cartoon of pregnant Lucy yelling, "God damn it, Charlie Brown!" I found a stash of firearms in a secret room underneath my staircase a week after moving in. In my house, there was an upstairs bedroom that was made into a game room for me and my sister. When we were about 12 years old, we realized that a section of the paneling came off and there was a small closet-sized room behind it. We kept it a secret so that when friends came over, we'd have the ultimate hiding spot for hide and seek. A few years later, we were talking to our parents about what we found, and they said that the house was built during the Prohibition era, so they most likely used it as a place to hide alcohol. You know, I would have never guessed that Prohibition-era stashing would be one of our most recurring answers here. Turns out every other person was just holding a keg and some bottles of whiskey for whenever the local speakeasy was closed. The more you know. There was a small door under some stairs, almost like Harry Potter's room in my old apartment in Venezuela. We'd lived there for a year until I leaned on it and felt it wiggle a little and realized it was a small square door. I was too scared to open it, so I had my dad do it, and about 20 or so cockroaches flooded out. Never have I felt so much panic. I went to visit my grandparents a few months after they'd moved into a new house out in the country. I got into a bit of horseplay with a cousin and got shoved into a wall. It broke a big hole and we realized there was a large empty space back there. With Grandpa's help, we tore the wall down and found a little room full of planting trays and grow lamps. There was a number of books about horticulture and one specifically about growing Mary J. There was no secret way in as far as we could tell. Someone had just walled off the entire room for some reason. In a house a friend was renting, I realized that there was a missing 5 feet between the back wall of the master bedroom and the back wall of the garage. Poking around the garage, I found a piece of plywood with concealed hinges, held shut with 2 nails. Opened it and found a 12 by 5 room with walls covered with foil and a couple of outlets for lamps on the ceiling. My friend converted it into a walk-in closet. I lived in the house of my grandma for a few years. The secret room beneath a trapdoor on the 2nd floor was basically a void between walls on the complicated 1st floor. It was used to hide Jewish families during World War II. We couldn't find the access to the crawl space during the first inspection. We didn't want to buy the house until we saw every inch, especially vibratio foundation. Turns out one of the closets had such a perfect carpet job you couldn't tell the floor was a carpeted door. You have to pull the carpet to lift it. Nothing interesting in there apart from a small crack. My student house at university. I lived there a couple of months before the gas meter guy came around and asked where the meter was. Us 4 clueless students had no idea, so he was like, "Maybe it's in the basement." We said we didn't have a basement. He basically says, "Sure you do." Goes over to the edge of the carpet in the hall, pulls it up and reveals a large door in the floor, which leads to a basement. The gas meter turned out to be out back, but we liked our new basement. I had to do this a lot when installing TV. You don't have an attic, so I've got to get under the house. Way too many people don't realize they're sitting on top of anything from a simple crawl space to a full-on basement. A lot of the time they're renters and the landlord doesn't want them in the basement for whatever reason. It's not my problem, I'm just running cable. I bought a house back in 2010. There was a wooden box next to an old oak tree in my backyard. It had no doors and no way to look into it. The box was about as big as a love seat and it looked as old as the house, about 30 years. But it was very well kept, no bug damage. I waited for about 2 years until I got the nerve to open it, and it was empty. It wasn't our house, but a secret room in our barn. When we moved to the property, the barn was full of all kinds of stuff, so it took about 5 years to find it. We were kids building a fort, moved some old wooden packing boxes and found a little door. There was a bunch of Christmas decorations from the 70s, including a cutout of Santa, so when we saw his head we thought we'd found a body. I never said we were smart kids. Once we realized it was just decorations, we crawled in to explore and fell through the floor to the rooms below. Good times when my dad found the collapsed ceiling in the wood shop. Whoops! My old house had this weirdly large concrete slab in the corner of the yard that was covered by a ton of leaves when we moved in. I thought it was maybe the foundation for a shed, but it was in a very odd location. Years later, when I was getting ready to move, it bugged me that I didn't know what it was for. I got a friend to help me come dig around it, expecting to confirm that it was just an old foundation. We dug for days in the middle of August. We had to start digging at night to protect ourselves from the heat. We got about 15 feet down, and the concrete wasn't showing any signs of ending. We eventually struck a pipe with a nozzle and discovered that there was more concrete moving towards the center of the yard. About a week later, my dad came home and almost had a stroke when he saw we were digging up half the yard. We'd sold the house and were expected to leave by September 1st. He made us fill it all in, and I left home never finding out what it was. Some of my teachers, who were long-term town residents, told me that my neighborhood had been farmland before development, and that there may have been several bomb or fallout shelters in the area. I would have loved to have found an entrance into the bunker, if that's what it was. I just googled concrete septic tank, and it definitely seems like you were trying to get into an old tank of poo-poo. Yeah, as cool as finding a fallout shelter seems, I think on the off chance that you could have cracked open a container filled with feces, you were probably better off not knowing, right? Not my house, but my elementary school, a small one in the countryside. 1990, after some PE hours, a friend of mine and I were horsing around downstairs in the basement outside the locker rooms. In the process, we tackled each other with shoulder pushes, and my friend flew into a panel at some point, where a screw popped out of a panel that revealed overpainted screws that revealed a panel door. The janitor thought it was just the ducts for air or a water pipe maintenance under the school when we told him about the door, and asked, and he said he came to the school in 1971, but never had been in there. Of course, the two of us being 6th graders, we had to go on a hunt and later returned with a screwdriver after school hours. The school wasn't locked due to an after-school club in the same place. We entered with a flashlight. It was a secret basement of ducts at first, super dusty, and metal stamps revealed at least something in the corridors was built in 1959. The school was built in the 1950s. But the fun part was when the 1x1 meter ducts suddenly ended out in a slightly larger room, 2 meters tall and probably 5 meters by 2 meters total. It had old equipment, like tables and stuff with military emblems on them, and we thought, of course, it could have been an old Third Reich headquarters or something, not adding 2 and 2 together to figure out that the school was built later than 1945. But it was an old nuclear shelter thing that later was revealed to be a cancelled part of the school. Like planned and built, but never executed properly due to the budget, and the ducts had been the old ducts for maintenance of water and sewage pipes. So exciting, but in the end just a budget-cut nuclear shelter with closets, blankets, tables, and a little kitchenware of military origin. But holy crap did we feel like Indiana Jones at that moment. What jobs are you finding it impossible to hire people for, and why? The company I work for is hemorrhaging employees. We caption phone calls for people who've lost their hearing. It requires 2 weeks of training, honestly, it should be 3, and it's a skill that doesn't come easily, but nearly everyone is capable of picking it up. We sit in cubicles and don't interact with anyone, we just listen and caption. They'll basically take anyone over 18. It was a good job when I started a few years ago. The time between calls was enough to study or browse the internet, the pay was pretty fair. Now the idle times have fallen dramatically and the pay hasn't changed one bit. Meanwhile, similar call center jobs are paying more just to read from a script. People quickly get burnt out and they quit. The department in charge of scheduling is a mess. It's mismanaged to hell, and the employees are even more overworked than the captioners. Interactions with them can be shady as all heck, and they're known to go back on their word about time off and schedule changes. They did an employee morale survey just yesterday, and I tore them apart. My sister worked here too for over a year and quit today after being very honest in her own survey. As a night shift employee, my pay is higher and my workload is less, so I'm still doing okay here and I actually like the job. But the day shift is a joke and they'll have to change real quick if they want to continue. As it is, they completely deserve to be struggling like this. The company I work for has been trying to fill a dispatcher position for 1.5 years now, part-time, evening shift. They're not offering competitive pay and everyone is suffering for it. Trying to get someone for $1 over minimum wage for a job that should start a good $5 to $7 an hour more is painful to watch. The people we get are either incompetent or they realize really quickly what the job entails and they book it out of here. It's amazing how it never occurs to some managers to raise the compensation when they're struggling to fill a job. The economist Dean Baker writes a lot about this. Basically, he quips that a lot of managers and business owners who complain about a skills shortage are in fact suffering from a shortage of skills, namely their understanding of basic labor economics. One big problem, and I see it echoed in a lot of the other comments here, is that employers don't want to train. Companies just don't want to invest in their workers anymore. They only want to hire experienced people. They don't want to apprentice, and if they do, they don't want to pay for it. They expect colleges to do all of this for them. What I've found is that college can't fulfill this role, even though colleges sell themselves as if they can. College can only teach you basic hard and maybe some soft skills that can maybe get one's foot in the door. If employers want good employees that will stick around, employers need to be willing to train and pay employees well, even in training, and not dole out crazy or unrealistic workloads or an otherwise toxic environment. Training will make them good, specific to your industry and company, and the pay and positive work environment will help them stay. Seems like everyone here gets this very basic concept apart from the people in charge. The narrator has a feeling that we might be seeing a lot more of this sort of sentiment in the answers to come. The strip mall down the street from my work is having trouble hiring security guards who don't sell smack. I'm laughing imagining an interview. I would like to be a security guard. Great, but you can't sell substances. Oh, screw that. People to work in nursing homes, in PT, OT, kitchen, nursing staff. I don't know if it's just the company that's having issues, 2 of our facilities are having staffing issues, but we're constantly understaffed and getting overworked to the point where more people are leaving because they're overworked. Management keeps saying nobody's applying, but I don't think they're offering people enough to stay or want to work here. Yep, CNA here. Caregiving jobs are one of the most underpaid professions for what we do. They're understaffed at almost every facility I've ever seen. We have a freaking demanding job. Physically, mentally, emotionally. We wipe butts, clean up all the bodily fluids you can think of, get physically and verbally attacked all the time. We run ourselves ragged on huge assignments, barely get 2 minutes to go to the bathroom sometimes, or sometimes not at all. We get close with our residents and patients, and we bathe them and hold their hands and laugh with them. We're with them when they have birthdays and when they're sick and when they die. We become their family when they have none. These should not be barely above minimum wage paying jobs, but they are. The only way to get good workers to come in and stay is to pay them what they deserve. My first job was as a server in a dining room in a nursing home, and this is exactly what happened. Turnover was so high that by the time I'd been there for 4 months, I was the experienced one. Wound up leaving because we were so understaffed and I was the only one available. I was flunking 2 classes and had to leave to save my grades. Construction manager here. The demand for construction is here, but the workers left during the recession and don't want to come back to repeat history. I'm in this boat. I worked for 12 years as a carpenter and I loved it. Work fell off in 2009. Held on as long as I could, lost my business and my house. Gained 2 kids. Went back to school in 2011 to support the fam. Now I work in IT. No way I'm giving up this salary and benefits. I miss construction so badly though. Despite what employers will say, all jobs are fillable if you pay enough money. There was a CEO a few years ago who wrote in complaining that he couldn't hire welders, and it turns out they were offering $20 an hour. That's a quarter of the going rate for welders, by the way. Keep this in mind when a CEO says, "I can't find good workers." The left-off piece is always, "at the rate I'm willing to pay." My valet company is having an incredibly hard time filling supervisor positions at locations that are slow, and you don't do anything for 12 hours. It's paid $15 per hour. Though part of the reason why it's hard is because they want these people to be educated for some reason. EMTs and paramedics. I've been in the position to hire them, and I can't get anyone, and I know exactly why. Hours. Standard week for EMS is 60 to 100 hours. Many EMTs and medics work more than 24-hour shifts sometimes. The pay is terrible. I have over a decade of experience. I have ACLs, PALs, PHTLs, ITLs, ATLs, and about a ton more Ls, and I can hardly score more than $15 an hour here. Injuries. The work is backbreaking. Lifting people that are 500 plus pounds and the 90-pound cot is a great way to get a hernia. And that 500-pound person you had to drag out of a bathroom. Psychological issues are very common on the job, and the list goes on. It's no surprise people avoid EMS like the plague. Anyone want to be a school bus driver? Good. Do you have a valid CDL? Any DUIs? Criminal record? Oh, okay, never mind. Literally anyone, please. I worked as a school bus driver in a Midwestern state. Got paid just over $100 a day, and I worked about 5 hours a day total. Sounds pretty great, but you only work 180 days per year. Production line worker. No education needed, not dangerous, can listen to music while you work 9 to 5 Mondays through Fridays. $15 an hour starting. They call them unicorns for a reason, but people with both programming and design skills. They're few and far between, but it's pretty much an instant hire if you have both. They really help to bridge the gap between dev and design teams and are almost always in demand. My hospital has a hard time finding nursing assistants. Who knew it would be hard to find people willing to wipe butts for no money? Housekeeping at my hotel. Nobody wants to clean up after the nastiest animals on the planet. Plenty of hours and reliable work to be had, but nobody wants to do it. They should be paid more, I guess. Or people could just be less disgusting. Based on the job ads I've seen, I think they're having a little trouble filling the entry-level 3 to 5 years experience jobs. No, I'm not just playing off the meme. These postings were the bane of my existence when I was job hunting. You should apply anyway. HR always puts that in. As far as I know, it's industry best practice. 2 years ago, I was sent a job posting that needed 5 years experience with Server 2012. My inexperienced friend has that job now. Where the frick are you people posting your jobs? Because I've never seen openings for any of this crap. Well, truck drivers. Most of the people on the road are in their 50s or 60s. They're starting to retire or die. It's even hard to find contract drivers to help on busy delivery days. Just because billion-dollar trucking companies might get automated in the next 20 years, it doesn't mean most companies can or will. That doesn't even touch on the inevitable regulations by the DOT, which will almost certainly require a human hand behind the wheel in the case of an emergency. On top of that, you'll have CDL even if automation does take over. That alone will net you decent-paying jobs relative to other jobs that don't require a college degree. This writer makes a very good point. They'll need someone there as a fallback, and they'll likely end up doing a fair bit of work anyway. Although sitting in a somewhat automated vehicle might mean a wage reduction in the short term, if enough of those people strike when it happens, hopefully eventually it'll balance out. Engineers in general, but specifically structural engineers for aircraft, is always hiring somewhere. A third of the industry could retire any day now. Lead and management roles are aplenty. The job requires keen problem solving and math. Typically, employers want people with high GPAs if right out of college. This is a field where all the bullcrap math and problem-solving you did in college matters, and you start to realize that you didn't even scratch the surface of analysis there. The biggest issue is that tons of people are believing the crap that they need a master's to improve job prospects, and all of my bosses pretty much agree that they'd rather 2 years of experience than a master's. Experience is everything in this field, seeing different structures, different problems, different airframes, and tons of ways to solve problems, and pretty much most of the industry has under 10 years of experience. The place I work can't frickin' retain good employees because they work us to death. I make over $50K a year in construction, and these buttholes work us to the bone. They've been in the business, it's a franchise, for over 30 years, and I think they have 3 people that have been there longer than 5 years. In the 2 years that I've worked there, they've gone through damn near 10 or 12 people on my side of the job, and probably 6 people in the office. My buddy is putting in his 2 weeks' notice tomorrow. I frickin' hate it there. I've reached the point where I just don't want to do crap for this company because it's all take on their end. Anyways, construction. They train, still can't retain employees. Dog groomer. On average, they make $600 to $700 per week, but to find one is impossible, let alone one that can groom and manage to be the salon manager. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. In New Zealand, we have a huge shortage of competent, qualified carpenters and heavy truck drivers. Funny that it's the older type of trades, it's like they've fallen out of fashion. Mate, they're all doing scaffolding in Australia at the moment. In my experience of heavy truck drivers in New Zealand, there's a high turnaround due to overwork, exhaustion, and being treated like cattle. 70-hour weeks enforced whenever you're in contract breach or no hours. Some sectors are very competitive within themselves to get on site first, to deliver the most loads, to get the best payload. This is a real issue in logging, and drivers often bounce between companies because they get so mad at one that they leave, but then they don't have anything else to fall back on. Trucker rage is not pretty. I've seen fights, logs all over roads, trucks down ravines, air rescue. Truck driving is stressful. It doesn't pay that well unless you own the truck. It means early starts, sometimes being away from family, and all this to be treated like a non-person. My source? I worked in logging logistics, trained others in logistics, and then ran a specialized division of a general freight company for transport logistics. I've noticed that restaurants have a tough time getting servers and cooks, and the food is getting bad at mid-range restaurants and customer service is horrible. And it's pretty simple why. Making food tends to be pretty nasty. The business is run on slim margins, because of rent, power, ingredients and stuff, and the only one that they can really cut costs on is labor. At least in America, the minimum wage is pretty far below the poverty line, but even high-class, expensive places might only pay a few bucks over that for entry-level positions. And chefs, managers, and stuff don't tend to move around much, which means you're pretty much stuck there until someone quits. Now, unlike a monarchy, things actually get worse as you go up the food chain. Your pay goes up linearly, but your responsibility doubles or more. If any dish ever goes out wrong, it's on you. If something isn't prepped, you're going to have to do it. Now, waitstaff tend to make more than kitchen staff for less work, mostly because of how tips work in the US. However, waitstaff aren't stuck at crappy places like the cooks are. If you've waited once, you can wait anywhere, but if you don't know a kitchen's layout or rules, you're not going to accomplish much as a chef. In short, once a restaurant stops being an above-average place to work, the good wait staff leave. The entry-level people stop joining, kitchens tend to have insane turnover, and the whole thing can pretty quickly go to crap. Programmers for industrial environments. It's incredibly hard finding PLCs and robotics programmers that want to get their hands dirty with bigger, complex industrial machinery. It seems counterintuitive, but the problem is most kids just want to do desk programming or handheld electronics, apps for phones or tablets, Windows or Mac, working on PCs or the like, drones, toys, little things. I'm not saying pure software programming isn't satisfying, but seeing machines moving that weigh 10 tons and are the size of rooms because of something you programmed is unbeatable. Teaching jobs. At my school, we've had multiple teachers quit throughout the year and could never replace them, so we just replaced the class. One of our foreign language teachers quit, so they just forced all the students to take French instead, with every class having at least 35 students. I just looked a few minutes ago and we still have more than 10 positions open for the next school year, which starts in 3 weeks. Nurses. Huge supply and demand problem here in the UK. I've also heard there's a huge shortage of teachers in the UK too. These comments were, interestingly enough, written well before the pandemic, which would see immense challenges leveled at both of these professions. As someone who's visited that country a lot, I've always said it's nothing short of miraculous how good the National Health Service is despite how awfully it's kicked about by the various governments in the last few decades. Let's pay them with more than claps. Louisville, Kentucky is a foodie paradise, but there's currently a shortage of restaurant workers. One restaurant group spokesman was in the newspaper as saying something like, "My line cooks can make $17 an hour and I don't have a shortage of workers. Maybe these businesses complaining should take a look at their low wages." I literally went to his restaurant because of that quote. I support common sense. There's a restaurant near me that will tell their workers they'll start at $10 an hour, and then after 2 weeks of working there, they'll get a paycheck that's them being paid minimum wage. When the workers get angry, rightfully so, and ask the managers why they aren't making $10 an hour like they were promised, he'll say, "You have to earn that and show me you're worth $10 an hour." That manager can't seem to understand why people walk out mid-shift with 300 chicken breasts left to pound out. It's perfectly simple to get a job at my company. I just need someone with the wisdom of a 50-year-old, the experience of a 40-year-old, the drive of a 30-year-old, and the pay scale of a 20-year-old. Also, 25 years experience for an entry-level position that will require 17 obscure certificates, a security clearance that we won't sponsor, and a lie detector test. Thank you. My former landlady works in HR for a recruiting firm. She found on multiple occasions that she had to hire people whose interviews were train wrecks and had huge red flags, like large gaps in the work history, talking like 6 to 10 years, no kids, as well as one that had a major problem with a former employee, all because they were fluently bilingual in English and French. These were mainly call center type jobs, sales development type things, not the funnest work, but if you speak French and you need a job, you can find one in southern Ontario. I work at a school for gifted children, and it's incredibly difficult to find a good defense against the dark arts teacher, let alone retain one for more than a year. Yeah, try telling most of these jobs you're a felon and watch them glaze over. It doesn't matter how back on track your life is. Sometimes it doesn't matter how long it's been. I'm employed by a small business simply because nobody else wanted me. The upside? My employer has me on his side through and through. There's something to be said for a guy that hears me out, doesn't judge, and offers me a job. Does it pay the best? No. However, it does pay me enough to help me keep building my life. It's flexible and doesn't demand the frickin' universe out of me while paying jack. Looking at you, food service. You want good candidates. Sometimes, just maybe, good people have skeletons. I'm not an employer, but I work in the AG industry, mostly in packing facilities as an inspector. They never have enough labor. They're always hiring no matter who you are. They don't test for substances, and it's damn near impossible to get fired unless you mess up real bad. Like getting in a physical confrontation with the supervisor bad. And even then the same people will be back next year. I worked in a vegetable cannery for 2 summers. If you don't mind monotony and being alone with your thoughts for 8 hours, it's pretty nice work with reliable hours. You meet quite a colorful group of characters doing factory work. The only person I know who got fired stole a 50-pound bucket of strawberries and was told to never come back. More than 10 years as a headhunter here. If the job pays less than $15 an hour, it will be hard to find talent that will accept that pay rate and not have red flags like large unexplained gaps in unemployment, major spelling errors on their resumes, or even cursing in the interview with me. Seriously, not appropriate for any industry. Once you can pay about $35K or more, the talent pool starts to open up significantly, and you can start seeing more stable work history, good communication skills, and brick-and-mortar college degrees. In short, low-paying jobs are tough to hire for, and applicants applying to them don't care much. Those roles are abundant and easy to get since no one else applies. Basic retail person for specialty chocolate shop. I'm just baffled at how hard it is to get someone for this job. We pay more than most retail jobs in the area. It's the easiest retail job I've ever worked. Customers are 90% nice because who gets nasty about chocolate? We'll teach you everything. You get to dip things in chocolate and make fudge and take home mistakes. We give you free chocolate. I can't even get people in to interview. Out of 20 calls I made last week, I've been trying to hire since March, 5 were the wrong number or out of order, 10 were voicemails that never called back, and 5 were interviews that just never showed up. It's been months of this. What the frick? Not an employer, but accountants. More specifically, CPAs. Sure, there's a lot of us, but the companies I've worked for all have trouble filling open positions. Most use recruiters who charge a month of the position's salary if the person gets hired. Basically, it's a case of demand being much higher than supply. That's probably why my accounting graduating class had a 99% job placement before graduation. I haven't seen web developers or programmers or software engineers yet. Lots of good coders out there, but open seats want client-facing, full-stack, MVC, Angular, Sitefinity, MonGodb, Swift, and a glittery unicorn. Tenors who can sight read and sing in tune for paid positions in professional vocal ensembles. I wonder if there's a greater or lesser supply of these than in the mid-20th century, to be honest. It feels like younger people in choir, musical, and orchestral pursuits are just much fewer and further between in modern times. Or is the talent pool just that good at honing in on the best jobs? While more and more people are realizing how awesome getting into coding and programming can be, there seems to be a significant lack of individuals who are capable of critical thinking on top of programming. You'd think the two would go hand in hand, but they don't. Alright, so a lot of people are asking me about coding and being taught and stuff. The best way to code is to be a self-starter. Pick a language, grab a book or 3, and work through them. As with any skill, with enough practice you can master it, and coders come from a wide variety of backgrounds. Almost every secondary part of SKEET, skill, knowledge, expertise, education, training, can come into play when you code, from having an artistic background to theatrical arts to physics or math. The first coding language isn't relevant. Almost every language has a syntax that's fairly similar. While there are obviously differences between the languages, that's why they're different, learning one can lead to picking up others very quickly. Study. This is not a walk in the park per se, but with dedication you can do it. There's a bunch of great online tools to get you started. Critical thinking. Thinking critically isn't just about your ability to use logic. Logic and programming flow fairly naturally together. However, thinking critically is nuanced, and every role will force you to think differently each time. Problem solving is huge, time management is huge, and putting those together is massive. It's more important to fix this bug than it is to develop this feature, stuff like that. Pluggers. There are many jobs where I can just code without having to think, say a lot of people. Sure, we call those pluggers because they just plug away. Plugging can be useful, and they have a role, but it's usually not what we hire, as we want individuals who have their own thoughts and who push back on ideas and come up with their own. I would also suggest that this would get very boring for the plugger, but everyone has their own tastes and what they can or can't handle. And jobs? I'm getting a lot of questions on how do I get into a role like that? Do your own apps, build your own ideas, and again, open source projects. Join projects others are in that are open source, contribute and get feedback. Read books on critical thinking and common problems in software. Thinking Fast and Slow is a great example of a book I'd suggest anyone read. How did you get below rock bottom and then make your big comeback? My very first semester of college, I got pneumonia for the first few weeks. A week after that, I got a yeast infection, a very painful one too. Then I fractured my wrist a few weeks after that. Then, after I'd been home for Thanksgiving for a week and had to go back and finish the last 2 weeks of the semester, I thought, well, can't get any worse, and I was hit by a car a week later. Going into my last year of college, had some troubles with mental health after all that, but I'm figuring it out and I'm happy with where I am currently. My older brother passed away shortly after I found out I was cheated on by my girlfriend, all while I was homeless and slowly losing the use of my left leg due to illness. Then I got the news my innocent, autistic little brother got cancer. He's been in remission for a while now. Current biggest worry is about Batman or something. He's a great kid. I quit smoking cigarettes, green herb, and taking Oxy at the same time cold turkey with no help. My mental health deteriorated pretty fast. I felt like I really lost my mind for good. Took me a year to recover and feel relatively normal again. Every month that goes by from then, I feel better and better. Time was needed, I guess, for my brain's chemistry to balance. I still have the occasional craving for cigarettes. Not enough to restart, but when I see people enjoy their smoke, I sometimes feel so much envy. I don't miss the oxys at all, though. That crap is dangerous, and I'm happy that I stopped. I was homeless at age 18. I went to a homeless shelter despite warnings from some shady-looking guy. I got treated like crap, made fun of and belittled, and had my backpack with all of my important documents stolen. All this was by the shelter staff, by the way, the people who were supposed to help. I still don't donate to any homeless shelter. You don't know how they're really like until they're your last hope. After that, I sold my cell phone, bought a tent, found a backpack and a garbage can that reeked like cat pee, but was otherwise clean, and did my best to not starve while going from place to place. My tent got stolen eventually, but luckily nobody took the backpack. I also got a revolver at one point. I recovered by getting unbelievably lucky and having my uncle find me and take me in and even give me one of his old properties in exchange for fixing it up real nice so he could sell it when he retires. If it hadn't been for that, I would have self-deleted after that first snowfall. I was even saving a bullet for it. My girlfriend left me for my best friend. Then they kicked me out of the house that I was paying rent for. Turns out I was never added to the lease. Then they all stole my stuff by not allowing me near the house. I became homeless with just the clothes on my back. I was sick too. It was great. I worked my butt off to get an apartment, go to college with no student loans, and get a good job. This is definitely going to be one of those check your privilege videos for some of you, and for the narrator as well. I've been desperately poor and nearly thrown out of housing before, but never crossed over that line to homelessness. I guess there's still time though. Well done for getting back on your feet, commenter. I was sick of my job, and one of the few redeeming features, my closest work colleague, who worked for me in a team of 2, left. For entirely unrelated reasons to me. We're still friends. After a long time just feeling very alone, I split up with my long-term ex, who owned the house we both paid towards, and I moved out. Moved into the only flat I could afford in a quiet street, where nobody would really know if I was coming and going or not. Literal assets to my name at that point were a car, a handful of personal possessions. I took out a loan to buy the most basic furniture and appliances, kept everything extremely basic, hoping to move out ASAP. I'm an absolute introvert, no friends. I perform the bare minimum for family to stop them moaning, but otherwise I keep away from them all. I can easily go a year without seeing anyone outside of work. I don't even know the neighbors' names, but they complained several times when I first moved in about all kinds of made-up crap. Turned out that after bills and things, I had a pittance of money each month to do anything with, and nothing approaching luxury. Minimal shopping for food, clothes, and stuff for months on end. I kept the new address from everyone for as long as possible, even my employer, deliberately. I figured it would take several weeks for anyone to find me, and if it did it at the right time of year, it would only be my employer who'd notice I wasn't there first, and then try to trace back, which would be tricky without police help. Started writing something to explain it all, and at the bottom of the page I had a set of boxes for all the people I wanted to say something to. After a few months of trying to finish it, there was still nothing in any of the boxes. It was a small list of names of people who might notice and might be a little sad, but nothing in particular to say to them. I deliberately started spending time with those people, in case it was the last, and even found myself leaving them on, well, not quite a speech, but saying something they'd be likely to remember if they didn't see me again afterwards. But I worded it so it wasn't seeming unusual at the time. Which worked, by the way, nobody ever suspected. A year later, I'm still there. Not quite as rock bottom as I was then, but not much better. Made a set of deadlines for if it's not improved by X date for when I finished paying for certain things, and having some spare money. I had a couple of little free, cheap holidays with some of the people on the list. Again, always thinking, in case that's the last time, because I don't see those people that often. A 3-week vodka binge. I woke up in the hospital in restraints. It could only get better, to be honest. My girlfriend cheated on me, my uncle died in a house fire on Christmas, my cousin was shot 30-something times because he was in psychosis and tried to take a car. I watched my grandpa slowly wither away from a rare disease in his abdomen, failed all 5 classes that college semester, tried to end things but couldn't figure out how I'd self-delete, so that ex that cheated on me called the police, so I got charged for having alcohol. There was no miracle turnaround in the end, but I'm getting back to normal slowly but surely. I tried to not be alive anymore. I got caught at the right time by my mum. She broke down, told me it was all my fault and I was shaming the family name by taking the easy way out. I ended up staying at the hospital longer than necessary because my mum needed an excuse. I started planning elaborate ways to no longer be among the living and making it look like an accident or from a disease, an end that won't shame my family. I caught a bad case of tuberculosis. Laying in bed, I got a deliriously good idea. Start throwing up whatever I eat or drink. Take meds on an empty stomach. Take extra pills or take no meds. Having a weak stomach, now I'm coughing up fresh blood in the bathroom or wherever. I hide them away. Say that I'm taking my meds, nobody figures out. Go to bed one night, wake up in the hospital. I'm too weak to speak. I can't make much sense, but I somehow feel disappointed. I see my best friend beside my bed. She's crying her eyes out. Sees me, still crying. She says she knew I'll survive battling this disease. She says she wouldn't know what to do if I died. Continued to say many things that I've forgotten about. I feel like I've betrayed her. I'm crying with her. Long story short, I crawled out of the basement of rock bottom thanks to my best friend. Mine's still ongoing, but I overcame a substance addiction and major depression and found my dream job. Well, old mistakes came back to haunt me and led to an arrest and 1 month in jail after having had a baby 3 months prior. I was facing years in prison for a first-time offense when I got home to find out my dear husband had cheated while I was locked up. Then I lost my home and struggled to find work when I'd previously been able to find really good jobs. I'm finally working, but definitely not my ideal choice, and I'm still dealing with my case. I'm still hoping to recover from it all. I went to my dealer's house to score some smack. He lived in the basement of his grandma's place. Her entire place was decorated in pure white frilly pillows with Jesus' face on them. I hadn't gone twosies in like 3 days, and while we were waiting for this guy to arrive, we smoked a cig, which loosened up my bowels nicely. I took a number 2 in his grandma's bathroom, and in my borderline withdrawal stupor, I didn't realize that the toilet hadn't flushed completely. Flash forward a half hour to when the good stuff arrives, and we both get higher than God's left testy. I always smoked my smack off tinfoil, and it always made me throw up. So, I stumble my way back to the Lutheran toilet and yak my brains out. I go to flush, and it's clogged. But I'm gawked to high heaven, so I figure if I just flush again, it'll go down, right? Nope, not right. Anyway, I flushed like 3 extra times, and then it all came right back up. So my friend hears what's happening and comes running up to see what's wrong while I'm standing on the edge of the tub, while everything that had been in my stomach for the last 3 years came raging up out of the toilet. He started screaming that he's going to kill me, and I'm pulling a bunch of white, lacy towels off Grandma's bathroom wall. In the end, I used 6 or 7 towels, all with angels or Jesus' faces on them, to soak up my mess. I didn't quit using substances for another couple of months, but I never saw the aforementioned dealer again. It was definitely the lowest point of my life. In short, I flooded my dealer's grandma's bathroom and had to use her Jesus-approved towels to clean everything up. Yep, that's a definite low point. That poor old lady. I'd be fairly sure that you either got your dealer thrown out of her place or saw him in some pretty hot water afterwards for a while. Maybe you even had the knock-on effect of making him reconsider his life choices, but I guess I shouldn't hold my breath. My daughter went into sudden respiratory arrest when she was 2 months old. Day 9 of ICU, I got a call that my older 3 kids were in a bad car accident with their dad, and I don't know if they're okay. Fortunately, they walked away with only mild concussions, and my baby is preparing herself for kindergarten and as healthy as can be. I'm so lucky and blessed. About 7 years ago, I went to get £10 out of the cash machine to buy a train ticket home, and I couldn't. I had no money. I know that's not that bad, things could be worse, but that's the only time in my life I've had 0 money, and I felt awful. Luckily, a great man at work loaned me £100 and wouldn't even let me pay it back when I tried to. So, I got 3 misdemeanors and became homeless. Figured that was rock bottom. Had an upswing, got married, only to go to a festival and acquire medication-resistant skin mites. Took several years to get rid of them. They also left me with a residual skin condition that seems permanent, that doctors don't understand and can't treat. You don't really recover from stuff like this. What I did do was learn to compartmentalize my feelings, learn a ton of self-discipline, and become a way stronger person. Now I'm a full-fledged adult with a skin condition who's recently picked up painting again, has started writing, and is learning coding. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. After my stepdad passed away, I didn't really see my mum for 3 out of the 4 years I was in high school. 2 years I lived with her, she'd take off for weeks sometimes with no warning, and the other 2 I got passed to various family. When I was 19, I was supposed to finally move back with her when last minute she sent me to live with an aunt. The aunt's husband just opened a bakery, so I worked in the bakery doing cashier, stocking the front, dishes, making the coffee, cleaning the front entirely, and frosting the donuts. He did nothing except bake. I worked 70 hours a week from 3 a.m. to as late as 6 p.m. Monday through Friday and worked blockbuster 2 of those days until 10:30. I was sleeping 3 hours or less most nights, and he'd pay me approximately $1 an hour as payment for me living with them. I slept on their couch and had only a week or 2 worth of clothes with me. Eventually, my body started not being able to keep up the pace, and in the 3rd month, when I pointed out the sink was leaking, he asked me why everything broke around me and why I was so useless. I responded with, "I don't know, maybe it's the same reason you're a butthole." So I got kicked out, and I took months to recover because I was anemic and seriously exhausted. I ended up living with a friend, but I didn't make a lot, so I was living off noodles, water, and rice for months. In that time, I started dating a guy who ended up treating me really badly, and when I finally got the courage to break it off, he stalked me at work. The cherry on top was my estranged dad and I had started trying to build a relationship again, and he emailed me that I wasn't even his and I was the reason that my parents divorced. I did move back with my mum after that, and our relationship fell apart at the news that I knew about my dad because she thought I should hate her, and I didn't. She'd pick fights so bad I'd get bouts of IBS and have to miss work because I'd throw up for 6 hours so violently I'd pull muscles in my back, abdomen, and neck. At that point, I worked full-time and paid $600 rent to my mum for a 10x10 room with no privacy whatsoever. I'd never had a substance use issue, but she'd barge in without knocking just because she could. I wanted to throw myself in front of the train every day on the way home from work so I wouldn't have to go back to my mum's. Eventually, I had friends who knew I was doing badly, and it was getting scary, and they offered to let me move in with them. I cried and said yes. They helped me get my license and my first car. My mum and I since have mended our relationship after years of talking about it, and she finally understands more about how I felt. My aunt divorced her horrible baker husband, the bakery failed because he was lazy and didn't have people skills, and I'm doing much better now and have a much stronger support system. I just started therapy again. I even have a boyfriend who I've been with for 7 years who stuck by me while I worked through my trauma and issues with my past mistreatment by others. I still have a rough time, but I'm glad I'm still here. I was homeless when I came out of rehab, then I spent 6 months in a halfway house. I worked pretty hard to get a 1-bedroom in a share house in the city near me. While living with a group of strangers my age, I had a massive relapse and psychological episode which led to my telling of horrific and manipulative lies. Ultimately, I ended up in ICU for 6 days with internal bleeding. After quickly having to look for a new place, I checked into an intensive outpatient clinic that had a strong focus on dual diagnosis and therapy over the AA God model. It took years of continued treatment to get me properly medicated and as healthy as possible. It's still an ongoing battle, but I have much better tools. I remember sitting in my bedroom at 2 a.m. trying to make myself start the 10-page research paper due the next day and just feeling like life was impossible. I remember looking around the room for something to end things with. This was while I was on antidepressants, by the way. Somehow I managed to not end things then and there, but instead stumble into my roommate's room, wake him up and ask for help. I then lost control and started wailing and crying. He handled things surprisingly well. He went and talked to my professors the next morning and asked them to give me extensions. I ended up failing one of the classes anyway and almost failing the other. After that, everything changed. I learned how to take care of my mental and emotional health and never got to that point again. Later on, when I was doing a lot better, he became pretty depressed himself and would literally spend the entire day in bed. Then it became my job to encourage him and motivate him. He almost slept through a final exam, and I convinced the professor to let me leave, go home, and wake him up. So I kind of paid him back, I guess. Good on both of you. Friends make all the difference in the darkest periods of our lives. The narrator mentioned before that he was pretty poor and nearly out of home for a while. Well, that might have definitely crossed over the line if I hadn't had such great friends helping me out. Look after your nearest and dearest, folks, because with any luck, they'll do the same for you anyway. Caught my controlling, substance addict boyfriend cheating on me a few nights before we were both supposed to move into a new apartment. He raged and chucked me out of both apartments. I stayed with friends and at shelters while working 3 jobs to get back on my feet. Had a hard time finding housing. I was struggling with PTSD because not only did he turn on me, the entire community I'd built in the time I was with him did too. Even my own friends. Women were coming to me for months afterwards with confessions. I was also trying to stay sober during this time. I had nobody, was estranged from my family, wanted to just not be alive anymore. Eventually, I found housing with one of my remaining friends. I adopted a cat and worked really hard to replace all my furniture. The apartment was crap, but it was the first place I'd felt safe in years. Fast forward 2 years, I'm still working a lot, but I live in a much nicer place now. I have better friends and don't suffer with PTSD so much. My ex's actions still haunt me, but I'm a lot stronger and trust myself and my instincts more now. And I'm still sober. My husband lost his job and insurance. I kid you not, the very next day he broke a rib and had to go to the ER because he didn't know what had happened. Apparently, you can break your rib by sneezing really hard. 2 days later, I had to go to the ER for a kidney stone myself. The ER thought I was seeking addictive painkillers because we'd just been there with my husband, even though that first time we'd refused medication because he didn't want it. So they sent me home. Of course, this wasn't free, and they were really mean about it while I was trying to take severe pain like a champ and not cry because no one believed me. The next day, I'd thrown up so much from the pain that I'd damaged my esophagus and started throwing up blood as well. My throat felt like it was on fire and I couldn't breathe properly. We Googled it and every website said, "Get your butt to the ER," so we reluctantly went back. I won't go into that experience, but we basically had to beg the staff to see me after I'd laid on the floor outside the triage, in and out of consciousness for 6 hours. After they finally told me what had happened, they sent me home. I was still chucking up blood and in horrible pain from the kidney stone. It didn't get better. I didn't want to go back to the hospital after they'd failed to help me twice in the same week, so I went to urgent care instead. They said they weren't equipped to deal with my problem, but I told them what the hospital had done and begged them to try. They gave me an IV, pain medication, anti-nausea medicine, and a couple of other things, and frickin' finally, I was able to go home and recover. And then the hospital bills started coming. The hospital didn't do anything to help my problem, but 5 years later, I'm still paying for it. I can't remember how much it cost because it came as a series of separate bills, but probably about as much as our house all said. In short, got real sick the day after our health insurance expired, still paying for it. Proud to be an American. It was the depth of my eating disorder after starting a really crappy internship in the worst apartment I've ever been in. My landlord was a smackhead who wanted me to sleep with his friends. My roommates were two much older, creepy men. My workplace often had fires on the warehouse floors and didn't refill their fire extinguishers. And to top it off, I was going through withdrawal from my depression meds because my psychiatrist refused to do anything but raise my dosage when they didn't work, which was always. And my parents said I was slurring words now. The basement of rock bottom was staring at every single one of my ribs in the mirror in that crap hole, having not eaten for 4 days and being dizzy from withdrawal, crying because I knew I was worthless and still needed to be thinner. How did I get out of it? Time and luck. I started forcing myself to eat something every day. I left my job a month early to spend time with my friends and family, got a prescription for a different medication and started that. Went to a cabin with my best friends and focused on nothing but having a good time for a week. Moved from that sketchy apartment, started university again, and had to eat to think. Relapsed a bit along the way, but I finished the term. Then I started a new internship and discovered a group of people and an industry that I loved. And after 4 attempts, I finally found a therapist that I clicked with and have been working through my issues with since. I'm not out of the woodwork yet, I don't know if I'll ever be, but I'm at the edge looking out, and that's so much better than I ever imagined. Just over 5 years ago, I was homeless, in active addiction, and others were deciding if I should go to prison. Then the universe decided to show me that hell does in fact get deeper and took my fiancé from me when he took too many substances. I decided I had no idea how to live life and started taking advice. I let other people help no matter how much I hated their solutions. I went to treatment, did what was suggested, I got clean and slowly, very slowly, learned how to take responsibility for myself. I started making the right choices no matter how hard they were. Today I have the career I always wanted with money in the bank. I'm married to the love of my life and our relationship is better than I ever knew was possible. We have a beautiful 6-month-old baby boy who has my blue eyes. Friday we bought a house that we're in love with. If your life is a mess, it's probably not everyone else's fault. You should probably stop thinking you have the answers. Let go of the past and take responsibility for yourself. No matter what's happened to you in the past, it's still your life to live and you are responsible for it. Believe in yourself because your belief is the only one that can change your life. First, my dad died. Next, I learned my girlfriend cheated on me while I was at his funeral. Then I was on the verge of flunking out of college. Then my mum was falling so deep into depression, and my sister thought she might self-delete. The only reason I can explain how I got out of this depressing circle of hell was to just buck up. Nobody's going to help you. You need to find your own way out and put the pieces back together the best way you can. What's the most interesting mental disorder you've come across? Medical doctor here, neurologist. Capgras delusion. The patient is convinced that a family member has been replaced by an imposter who's completely identical. For example, the patient will tell you the person sitting across from them looks exactly like their spouse, sounds exactly like their spouse, has all the memories of their spouse, but that's not actually my spouse. And the patient oftentimes isn't overly distressed by this imposter. In 20 years, I've only seen this condition twice. I was also going to write about Capgras delusion. I had a case a few years ago. In this instance, it was a mother who was under the false belief that her son was a clone. We had some success with atypical antipsychotics, and I helped her focus her energy on being a good mother to the kid, whether it was hers or not, because she could agree that the child was innocent and needed a loving home. Family support was also crucial. A psychologist here, not someone I worked with, but I did observe someone with alien hand syndrome. The patient's left hand would stroke her hair and pat her face, but was not under her control. Each episode would last about 20 minutes. Turned out the cause was a tumor. Amazingly, it didn't seem to cause her any distress. I once worked with a guy whose voices were positive, like a cheer squad. So instead of, "You're useless, no one likes you," his voices said, "You look amazing today. People think you're charming and funny." It wasn't great though, despite what you'd think. He has enough insight to understand that they were as much a hallucination as if they were giving negative messages, and he felt this crushing, overwhelming pressure that he couldn't live up to the incredibly high standards set by his voices. It was quite crippling for him, really. As much as, if not more so, than if the voices were negative or even benign. Foreign accent syndrome is rare, but absolutely fascinating. Yes, my parents have a friend, Native American, never left Canada. Got into a bad fight one night and got her head rocked pretty badly and was knocked out. When she regained consciousness, she had an English accent, and to this day she still has it. I know a lady who hit her head while using a trampoline and started talking with a deep German accent. She still has the accent, but went to a speech specialist to learn how to speak with an American accent to get her old voice back. Maybe if I knock my head hard enough, I can get an accent that will stop confusing our viewers as to where I come from. It's tempting, but I also like having brain cells, so I'll hold off for now. Mental health counselor here. The interesting one is schizophrenia with visual hallucinations. Most people with schizophrenia have auditory hallucinations. I didn't realize how much more unsettling the visual ones were. The client I had with this disorder used to see me and other people he knew. He called me up once, yelling at me for coming into his apartment early in the morning. Even if I told him otherwise, the experience of seeing me is very real to him. I can't imagine seeing people in my own home, especially at night. That would freak me the frick out. Lawyer here, I did about 10 years criminal law. I've had many clients with schizophrenia. Auditory hallucinations must be disconcerting and terrifying. Visual would also be awful, but the oddest one I've come across was olfactory delusions. Client who had a psychotic break and had a range of hallucinations telling her to hire a car and drive across the country ASAP. She was arrested doing 180 kilometers an hour through a country town. The speed limit was 60, on a major highway. When I came down to see her, she was obviously unwell, but she also kept sniffing my hand anytime I asked her a question. Later, when she was well again, she explained it to me. She remembered everything, even though she had no history of mental illness prior to this time. Everyone bad, i.e. all of the police officers, smelled like rotting corpses to her at the time, but I knew I could trust you because you smelled like sunshine and flowers. This stopped along with her other hallucinations when she came out of psychosis. I never knew before then that delusional smells were also possible. Early on in my career, I worked at a planned community that functioned as a partial hospitalization program. One of the residents would bring magazines and newspapers he'd found to the main office floor every day. Sometimes he'd be upset, sometimes overjoyed, depending on the stories, because all of them were about him. I've never worked with someone with such delusions before or since. One day he was Michael Jordan offering to buy us cars. The next day he was the leader of the people behind September 11th trying to hide with us. He'd read his obituary, his wife cheated on him in a political scandal, he'd surveyed the Congo. We restricted and sorted his mail after the incident where he thought he was that terror leader, but he'd just find magazines through other residents or in the community. Phantom pregnancies are pretty fascinating. A woman can be so convinced she's preggers that her periods stop, she gets all the classic symptoms, and her belly might even grow. Nobody is totally sure how this happens. It's suspected that Queen Mary Tudor, or Bloody Mary, experienced multiple phantom pregnancies. In one case, she went into confinement at around 8 months and didn't leave until the 11-month mark when it was clearly obvious there was no baby. It was probably the most humiliating moment of her entire humiliating reign. Her husband abandoned her, both the court and the people she thought she'd lost her mind. Bear in mind that she was likely too old to conceive by the time of her marriage, and her constant illnesses from a very young age over the stress about her mother and a bit about her father. There was no way she would have been able to have a normal pregnancy. Also, share psychosis is pretty crazy. There was a case a few years ago where twin sisters visited each other. One was mentally ill and the other one wasn't. And the ill one went into a psychotic state, and then the healthy twin suddenly, for no reason, went into the same state. They threw themselves into traffic multiple times, getting hit by trucks. After being separated at the hospital, the healthy twin snapped out of her psychosis and was fine. The other one stayed in her psychosis and ended up killing someone with a hammer, and neither of them remembered anything that happened. One of my old friends worked in a care home for people with various severe mental health disorders. One of the clients, lovely guy, pretty easygoing by the standards of that institute, had a rock-solid delusion that he was CEO of the company, and the reason that he was there was some sort of CEO check-in on that specific house. He'd basically gently chastise all the workers for their jobs or congratulate them if they'd done something correct. He'd talk about promoting people, stuff like that. It was always fun to hear the stories about that guy at the end of the day. My mum was losing it towards the end, plus she was finally diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. She also had hallucinations. She was insistent that she worked for the care home she went to before hospice, and she'd tell us that her job was terrible there and didn't pay enough. She thought I was the nurse a couple of times before when she was staying with my brother. We pretty much went with it because it would make her upset if we didn't believe her. So I'd just listen like I was the nurse and then leave the room for a few minutes and come back and suddenly I was her daughter now. She called every nurse with brown hair by my sister's name. The sad part is we learned she had been seriously mentally ill for a very long time. We knew she was untreated for something, but didn't realize how the hallucinations ruled her life. She was paranoid of peeping toms, so my dad would play along because that was likely the easiest way to deal with her. My poor dad. I always expected her to die first, but my dad went before my mum. Hemi-neglect is a pretty interesting one. The affected person just doesn't realize that they have two halves to their body and only take care of one. Shave one side of their face, brush their hair on that side, wash themselves on that side, and the other side basically becomes dirty mountain man. Social worker here, used to work at a psych hospital. Saw a form of OCD where the patient couldn't let go of anything she came across or made. Leaves, sticks, tampons, pads, fecal matter, some stored in Tupperware, some or most hidden where her feet went in her bed. We'd routinely have to go through her room and get everything removed. I don't remember how she did in treatment, but I remember that she was a teenager and I felt terrible that that's what she was dealing with. It seems incredibly unfair that people can just have this sort of condition their entire lives. OCD is treatable, but it seems like compulsions like this would be so hard to break, especially when they're kept hidden by the person doing them like this. Medical doctor here, not a psychiatrist or psychologist, but I did encounter a pretty interesting patient case on my psychiatry rotation when I was in medical school. There was a patient at an inpatient psychiatric facility for self-deleting ideation. During her admission, she constantly insisted that she had a mass in her chest and demanded to be physically examined only by male doctors. When the psychiatrist I was rotating under declined to perform a physical exam, she asked me to do it during my daily patient interview. I also declined the physical exam, but had a bit of a hunch to check her medical records. It turned out that she had an ultrasound done a week before that found only normal tissue without masses. However, apparently this lady had frequented many doctors' offices with various complaints of an unspecific nature and would usually focus on her chest or downstairs area when she visited male physicians' offices. The psychiatrist I was working with diagnosed her with factitious disorder, formerly known as Munchausen syndrome, and also felt that she had a personality disorder. He felt it was a histrionic personality disorder, but also felt it was possibly borderline personality disorder. Definitely cluster B though. It seems her goal was to mostly get attention from medical professionals. She had a lot of issues, but we also had to be careful to make sure she wasn't fishing for a lawsuit. Patients like her are why doctors document everything meticulously. So the patient wouldn't admit to making things up all the time. According to the psychiatrist I was working with, she didn't actually believe any of her health problems existed, and her primary goal was the attention from medical professionals. If she actually believed she was sick, we would have diagnosed her with illness anxiety disorder, commonly known as hypochondria. Medical doctor working in inpatient psychiatric facility. We had a psychotic patient with visual hallucinations who saw colored dots all around him during episodes of distress. The great thing about it was, he told us he was able to blow the colored dots away. We encouraged him to do it as it seemed to greatly reduce his anxiety. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I never saw a patient with it myself, but I'm a nurse, and in the electronic medical world we use walking corpse syndrome. It's always at the top of the diagnosis choice list. Apparently, it's when you're convinced that you're dead. Never understood why it was top of the list. I'm an EMT and I've come across this twice. The first person was oddly pleasant. The second person had hostile tendencies towards people who tried to get them to eat or provide medical care. They'd soil themselves because corpses don't have to go to the bathroom. Mental health counselor here. The most interesting disorder I've ever treated was dissociative amnesia. The guy had big edits out of his life that had him ending up in trouble with his girlfriend, and when I was seeing him was on the border of him getting in trouble with the law. I actually know of someone that suffers from something like this from PTSD. She was in the World Trade Building on September 11th, and she barely escaped before the building she was in collapsed. After that, she acted normal, but her eyes were blank and the way she talked felt pretty forced. Anyways, for about a year after that, she disappeared. Her family thought she was kidnapped because nothing was missing from her home but her car and a few things like some clothes. The police searched but gave up. Her parents had money, so they hired some PIs that ended up finding her a year or two later. She had moved cross-country under a new name. She doesn't remember a thing from right before September 11th until they found her. I haven't talked to my buddy in a couple of years, but last I heard she was making good progress with therapists. She even got married, but never moved back. I have always thought narcissistic personality disorder was fascinating. You have people whose bullcrap is right in front of them and they'll still tell you and truly believe that they haven't done a single thing wrong. I've got a guy now who cheated on his wife and he genuinely doesn't understand why no one trusts him. It's amazing. Dated a woman who wasn't diagnosed, but I suspect she had it too. Gaslighting was real to the degree where I'd only speak with her in writing, even in person, and she'd sit there and say things she wrote weren't actually written. She eventually admitted to gaslighting, so I'm unsure if it could even be considered NPD. She'd violently argue that she did say something she didn't say, or didn't say something she did. Even in writing. We'd both be there looking at what she wrote and she'd deny it. I'd record our verbal conversations and replay things that she'd said. She'd deny saying it even as we heard it. She'd play confused in a conversation and attribute the confusion to a convo to things never said. Literally. We'd review an entire conversation, never find out what she was complaining about, and she'd just break down, cry, and yell. Worst of all, she sent me a message on Ramadan saying, "With Ramadan approaching, if I ever wrong you, please remember you probably deserved it and may Allah forgive you for being annoying." Doctor training to be a psychiatrist here. I had a patient recently who was convinced he had fathered a child. He hadn't. He got in trouble because he'd go to this kid's school to try to contact him. Parents were understandably upset and had never had any contact with the patient previously. The patient believed that Stephen Hawkins had inseminated the mother by some sort of telepathic process he couldn't explain. Truly bizarre, and so far hasn't really gained insight with treatment. He gets very emotional thinking about his son. Still works full-time though, and in many respects leads a normal life. Amazing. Yeah, it's remarkable how, apart from these certain quirks, someone with a disorder is essentially just a normal, flawed person with one blinder or eccentricity in one part of their brain. There are certainly people with mental disorders who've never been diagnosed just because it either hasn't come up in too detrimental a manner or has been repressed by societal norms. I worked as a crisis worker as a behavioral health case manager for a year. There was a client there with intermittent explosive disorder, probably the most interesting client I've ever met. Would, as the diagnosis suggests, explode during an escalation. It was too much for us to handle, and the client ended up getting taken to the hospital. I was a support worker, and one case I had was a boy with pandas syndrome. It basically manifests as severe OCD. It can completely alter the personality of a child. This kid wouldn't leave his room, to the point where he'd just pee on the carpet. He'd scream obscenities to his parents for no reason. This was actually caused by having strep throat, except the bacterial infection didn't go away and it can turn into pandas. And the treatment is most often just a very specific antibiotic. But the children often need therapy to deal with the aftermath. Their personality goes back to normal, but it's very upsetting to go through. My sister had pandas. The tricky thing with finding out in her case, though, was that before and still she has severe anxiety, oppositional defiance disorder, major depression, and ADHD. Pandas was just increasing the severity of her already existing mental health conditions, and they only wound up figuring it out because of her other rare physical health problems she was experiencing. She did end up returning back to her own unique brand of normal, but it was a pretty hellish thing watching my family struggle until then. Pain conversion disorder. I had an ex-girlfriend that was in a wheelchair, but her parents and doctor said she could walk, but her legs wouldn't let her. Her parents said she might have woken up during a surgery she had when she was a kid, because it all started after that surgery. She even went to physical therapy for it for years, and she might still do that, I don't know, but she couldn't move around without the chair. Kind of, but she couldn't walk. So it was almost a disability, but not fully. Very confusing. She was supermodel hot though, and the coolest girl I've ever dated. I've worked with one client with legit dissociative identity disorder. She reported 6 personalities, but I only ever met 4. I'm worried to find out when the other ones come out. She was actually managing fairly well, but definitely better after some trauma work and a med regime. Still pretty wild when provocative Susie would show up and not normal, straight-up Susan. DID was always interesting to me when I was in medical school because the diagnosis is pretty controversial among psychiatrists. There seemed to be a great rise in diagnoses when it was portrayed more in the media, which points to a social contagion of some sort similar to how self-deletion, eating disorders, and self-scarring are contagious behaviors when exposed to them. I'd wager a good percentage of patients diagnosed with DID actually have borderline personality disorder because of the unstoppable identity those particular patients have. According to my professors in medical school, bipolar patients are particularly vulnerable to social contagions. Selective mutism intrigued me. They have anxiety to the point where they don't speak. Happened to my mother's granddaughter. After my mum died, she drew a painting of my mum, her grandmother, saying how nice she was to her. I wish she was able to say that to her in person. However, the condition is, as I understand, related to an anxiety disorder. Jerusalem syndrome, where a person who visits the Holy Land is convinced they are Jesus. It typically goes away once the person leaves. Maybe every single one of these people with the syndrome was actually possessed by our Lord and Savior. I am joking, but it's interesting that it keeps happening. I knew a guy who claimed to be the Lord for a while. Turns out he's not the Messiah, he's a very naughty boy. I'm a licensed medical psychologist now, but before I went to graduate school, I worked in an inpatient mental health hospital on adult and adolescent units. I'd say the most interesting 2 disorders I've seen are dissociative fugue and conversion disorder. I saw both while I was there. Dissociative fugue is a condition where someone can wake up one day and believe they're a different person for a short time. My experience was a man who woke up and drove his car from his home until it ran out of gas, which happened to be in my city. He had no ID with him, and I don't remember his name, family, or any details of his life. After a short stay in the hospital and some meds, he remembered everything and had a family member pick him up and monitor him for a while. But he still had to put gas in the car, which had been towed to the hospital parking lot. Conversion disorder is characterized by the individual losing the ability to do something, like walking, seeing, or talking, and believing that has a biological component. In reality, it's a response to significant trauma and is dissociative in nature. A woman in the hospital manifested the symptom of losing her ability to walk while she was there. There was no reason as to why she wasn't able to walk. She came in walking, was unable to ambulate while there, and left walking again. My mum had paranoid schizophrenia and would eat Vicks out of the jar to coat her brain so the Protestants couldn't hear her thoughts. She was Catholic. My dad was Protestant and became Catholic to marry her. Hear me out, maybe not the most interesting disorder, but interesting in prevalence is GAD. About 40% of men and 50% of women suffer from it in my office. The Western ideals of hard work, keeping up, pulling non-existent bootstraps is mentally harming everyone. It's a serious frickin' problem that the government and Big Pharma like to profit from. It's interesting because it's so disgusting. Humans aren't designed to be pulled in 30 different directions, but that's what modern society expects, and it's killing us all. My friend has complex regional pain syndrome. She experiences non-psychogenic hallucinations as part of that pathology. She's completely aware that there are hallucinations and has no psychosis. She sees white tigers, angels, and demons. The white tigers apparently have a thick and luxurious fur that's wonderful to touch. It's a horrible condition, but that aspect of it she really likes. Psychiatrist here. One of my most interesting cases was Cotard's syndrome. I was an intern and ended up seeing the patient on the inpatient unit and later in the state hospital. had the delusion that he was dead. You'd ask him how he was doing, and he'd shout, "I'm burning in hell!" My other favorite is a patient who had the delusion of pregnancy and thinks she's pregnant with over 50 babies at the same time. I'm only a psychology student, so I haven't seen any patients yet. But one of the most interesting mental disorders I've studied is prosopagnosia. It's the inability to recognize faces. But the thing that fascinates me the most is the fact that someone with prosopagnosia will be able to recognize others by some distinct characteristics, like a mustache or the voice, and won't be able to recognize them if they shave or don't talk. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.